Three, two, one.
Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the actor? And who's president? Jerry Lewis? I suppose Jane Wyman is the First Lady. And Jack Benny is Secretary of the Treasury. Practical jokes for one evening. Good night, future boy. No. Wait, Doc, the bruise on your head, I know how that happened. You told me the whole story. You were standing on your toilet, and you were hanging a clock, and you fell and you hit your head. That's when you came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which is what makes this can't be cast on Back to the Future possible. Hi, guys. Welcome. This is the
Yeah, this
next
is
can't be cast. How you
that
all
was a
doing?
good reference. I found it funny that
Thank
Discord
you.
had such a funny specific time to cut out as soon as at the beginning of it. I thought that was kind of funny.
Okay. Wow.
Anyways,
Great.
yeah, welcome to Campy Cast, the first episode of 2024. Um, let's hope this is a good
Yeah.
year for Campy Cast.
I
Hoping
know
for the
this is the
best.
second year we're opening the podcast with an episode about a time travel franchise.
Oh
How
yeah,
about
that's
that?
true.
That's
That
crazy.
wasn't intentional at
Yeah.
all, but
Last
yeah,
year it was Terminator. This year it's Back to the Future.
yeah,
As you know by my quote there. And I think if Anthony puts it in, we got a theme song now. Wow. How
yeah,
about that? Isn't that crazy?
yeah.
But anyway, I'm very excited for this. These are all movies I have varying levels of thoughts on, but they're all very, very
Yeah, we're
interesting
doing
to me.
the
And we'll
Back to
get
the
into that in
Future
a sec.
trilogy,
Mm,
and
yeah.
yeah, I'm interested to
However,
talk about
before
this.
that, mhm. before that, we got a certain mouse to deal with. Um,
Mouse, yeah, some
you
news.
know,
And first off, in the news is that Mickey Mouse from the iconic Steamboat Willie short is now in the public domain, and I think we should talk about this thing that happened and how
yeah.
it's being
So
used.
essential. Yeah, all right. See, my whole thing on this, I've said this before, but my whole perspective is I'm very happy Mickey Mouse is in the public domain. Mainly because if you don't know, Disney has been they hate the public domain. They've been pushing back at this for years, and the
Yeah,
reason
they've been trying
why
to like
is
stop
because
it.
basically they were like yeah, they were like, no, we can't have people use our characters. So really copyrights were supposed to expire like at least 20, 30 years ago. But Disney kept pushing it back because they didn't want people to use their characters, which is very funny because a lot of Disney's most famous stories, they were from the public domain, like Snow White, Pinocchio, Cinderella.
Peter
I think
Pan, I'm
Peter
pretty
Pan. They
sure.
were all
Yeah.
public domain. Yeah, but they can't use But Disney wasn't willing to let that happen to their characters. So we've been stuck with the same like couple public domain stories for years, and it's been very frustrating. But now Mickey is in the public domain, which is very nice. So's they don't mention so much, but so's Pete and
And
Minnie, but
Minnie,
they don't
yeah.
use
They
them
were
as much.
also
No
in
one,
the
they're not using
Steamboat
any of
Willie
them.
short. I mean, they
Hmm
might, well, they could use them in the certain things that they're made, but it's mainly Mickey Mouse that's like the
Yeah,
short they were
that's the
made.
only ones they can use now. I think. Oh man, it's
Can't use
crazy. In a couple
Goofy or
years, I think
Donald or
that's
any
when
of the other ones as of now
the
because those aren't in the
the
Steamboat Willie
public
short.
domain will be like insane in like a couple years because I think like fuck in like 10 years, Porky Pig goes public domain,
Oh,
and then Daffy
really?
Duck does, and then Bugs Bunny. So you got the Looney Tunes in like a decade from now with
Damn,
fair use.
that's
So
interesting.
that's gonna be like interesting story wise. But I think that is annoying though, because it's a necessary evil because I do ultimately like that we have all these characters. The problem is, however, people aren't using these for I think the best reasons. The things that are getting focus are all these stupid
And all
horror
horror
parodies.
movies.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
I genuinely
like look,
just
I'm not.
uh, I think I should talk about that. I just want to mention this since like I mentioned this in the part two of Elm Street video, but when I talked about Winnie the Pooh Blooded Honey, I talked about how lazily like I briefly mentioned it, and I might mention it again in the 2023 video, depending on when we do that.
Mm.
But basically,
Yeah, see. The same
That
thing happened
movie
with Winnie the Pooh,
sucks.
and it's very annoying there. But
Yeah, that thing was like,
I heard awful things about Blood and Honey.
oh
But
yeah, it's fucking
yeah,
terrible. And they're already like making a sequel to that this year because the movie had such a low budget, and there were some people who actually went to see it. And literally, the only reason people went to see it is so they could laugh at it. And I'm unsure if like the creators are aware of that because I've heard like from people who've like seen who actually went to see that movie in theaters. They said that like the whole theater just thought it was funny. Like that's it. So I wonder how the creators feel about that, or if they're even aware of it, because the
yeah.
movie doesn't really try to be
I
funny at
think this
all.
year. Yeah. Another bad thing about this is I know this year what they're doing is see now Tigger is also as Mickey did. So the
Yeah, Tigger is
Tigger
announced,
going
so
to the public
now they're
domain.
gonna put him in the
So
sequel.
so they got another Winnie the Pooh character to ruin now. Thanks guys.
Yeah, thanks a
Yay.
lot. And
But,
yeah, and in
mm,
the span of not even a frickin' flippin' fucking day, they already announced three different Mickey Mouse horror movie projects. One was
yeah,
Mickey's
yeah.
Mousetrap, which just looked like some sort of Winnie. It looked like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, basically. And bad act. It looked
Hmm.
exactly what like you'd think a low budget horror movie like this would look like.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's like
exactly.
another one that's in the works that's like different, but also is a horror interpretation of the Steamboat Willie short. And then there's like a freaking video game with like a suspiciously similar mouse creature that looks similar to Mickey Mouse himself. So like, is this it?
I'm
Like,
surprised none of them have been called Steamboat Killy.
oh,
Like they
I
do
mean,
that.
I don't think they've announced the title for the other Steamboat Willie horror movie that isn't Mickey's Mousetrap. They should have called
Mm.
Mickey's Mousetrap the Mickey Mouse Trap House or something like that. That'd be funny.
Literally, that seems like it would roll off the tongue better. Like it
No,
would
I'm
work.
unsure, but
Um,
yeah, it's like I don't know. I feel like it would be
mm,
funny if it was like
mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I was gonna say like a fucking horrific Home Alone parody where like Mickey's like the sadistic killer who like I don't know, do something creative with the horror
Mm.
thing in general. Just like try to go
See,
wild
I don't
with
even
it.
think the thing is, it's not even that. Oh, it's like horror, so it's bad. Like, and honestly, I'm not even surprised because if you notice, there's like
I'm not surprised
making Mickey
either.
Mouse corporate and greedy is not something that's like far gone. In fact, this has been happening for years. If you notice, South Park has had their own Mickey
Yeah.
Mouse parody that they've used since like season 13, and his whole thing is entirely this thing where they use him as the greedy corporate mascot for like
Yeah, and it's
Disney,
honestly
and it's
really
easy. Like,
funny in South Park if I'm being
yeah,
honest.
and the thing is that I love those episodes because it's not even just oh haha Mickey swearing. It's funny because of like the voice and how he's like it's Mickey Mouse being like, haha, we gotta sexualize teenagers for like Disney Channel, which is what
And
happens
then
in
he
like
beats
The
up
Ring.
the
They do that
Jonas
whole thing. It's
Brothers. It's really fucking funny to
yeah,
me.
yeah, that episode is really funny. There's and there's this other one where in like season 24 during the COVID stuff, Mickey and Randy go on like a bender together, and that's how Randy gets it's like the COVID thing. God, you could do funny things with like the Mickey, but the thing is, mm, it's just what if Mickey Mouse was gory?
Yeah, that seems like that's
I
literally
don't
seems
know.
like
Like,
everything the trailer's doing. Like there's just nothing interesting about it and it's looks bad, bad acting, bad. It looks like exactly what I feel like I would
yeah,
expect out of it. And there's nothing interesting to it. And I feel like you don't even need to do just horror movies. Like you could do a lot of interesting stories and different
exactly. This is the
genres.
thing. You have the Mickey Mouse at you, which is like, man. See, I people have been like stretching the truth. Like, okay, so here's the thing. Technically, the idea of Mickey Mouse is still owned by Disney. However, the version of him in Steamboat Willie is clearly public domain. And considering like how similar Mickey has like looked, there are even like promotional videos for Steamboat Willie at the time that made him red. So you can have like Mickey in the red overalls and like without the Steamboat Willie hat. Everything you can make to make him look like Mickey, you can have Mickey, and that's like there. The thing is, I don't know, it just feels like a waste of potential being like, oh, we're just gonna make him like gory and swear, and that's all. Like, come on, man. There's
Yeah.
more. And the thing that I think I really want people to do is it's weird. Despite him being like the mascot, there has never been a traditional Mickey Mouse movie.
It's kind
Like
of
by the main
weird.
Disney studio, there's not a
He's
Mickey
always just
movie. There's like
a
direct to DVD.
mascot. know,
Mhm.
like not a
Yeah.
theatrical.
And you know what? I think it would be cool if someone made like a real Mickey Mouse movie. Like, sure, you can't have Donald or Goofy or any of the gang, but you still got Mickey, you got Pete, you got Minnie. Just make an adventure starring Mickey Mouse. I think you can make something good there. But there's not much like people have done, and
Yeah,
it's a little frustrating.
I don't know. Maybe
That's my
like
2 cents on the issue.
yeah. I mean, I guess you could also include all the animals Mickey abused for instrument
Yeah.
entertainment in the short as well.
Man, it's kind of funny. I think Disney's happy they don't own Steamboat Willie anymore because if you watch that short, Mickey is fucking sadistic. He's like killing animals throughout
I
the
guess
entire
that's why it
thing,
would make
just
sense to do a
abusing
horror
everyone.
movie with him. I guess.
Yeah, so it's actually not even the. I think what would be funny is if they just did like the original Steamboat Willie short, but from like the animals' perspective, like the people
That kind of
Mickey's
would be
abusing.
funny.
It'd
I
be kind
also
of funny.
I don't know, like I don't know, make Mickey like some like sadistic hunter who kills animals for his own entertainment or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's not even just I don't like the idea that it's like horror Mickey. Just make it creative. Like I don't know.
Don't just
You
make
can do a
him
lot. Like
some
it's
guy
literally
in a
Mickey
Mickey
Mouse.
Mouse costume and he kills people and that's
Hmm.
it. That's the
No,
fucking
I think it would
movie.
be really funny if they did like a Mickey Mouse like horror movie, but the idea is Mickey's not like a killer, but he keeps getting hired by people to do like killings, and he acts just like regular Mickey Mouse. That's my pitch. I think that'd be really funny. Or my own pitch called Steamboat Willie and James Gunn is not a good filmmaker. Stay tuned for that one. But the point is Mickey Mouse. You got him here. He can do anything, and they're not letting him do that, and that makes me awfully annoyed.
Yeah,
But
yeah. That's like
yeah.
that's what I mainly have to say about it. As well, if I'm being honest. Yeah, that's like the main piece
Mhm.
of news. Unless I could like we could mention that in terms of other movie news, Jack Black was cast in the Minecraft movie, which is happening, and I feel like that
Yeah.
movie has just been like a weird thing to me. Like I keep thinking like, wow, an actual Minecraft movie, like interesting. It's so weird.
Uh-huh.
Now they're making like video game adaptations on all like, these like viral video games, and I feel like I guess the fan base is gonna be there. All these games that have like a massive like internet fan base. Like they made a FNAF movie. They're making
Yeah.
a Bendy and
Yeah.
the Ink Machine movie. Apparently, they're making a
Mhm.
Minecraft movie. Who knows? Maybe they'll make a Fortnite movie soon. Can't wait for that.
I the thing with all these like games that are being adapted into movies is I think there are some movies that could be like great adapted from games, but the games they're picking I don't think are ever that like good to pick. See, Minecraft, I admit I never got huge on the Minecraft train, but the whole idea of Minecraft, the appeal I see it as is like look, you can do literally anything you want in Minecraft. You can build whatever you want. The narrative of Minecraft, though, people like, it's like, oh, you kill the Ender Dragon. There isn't really even like a narrative. You just have to get to him, and then you kill him, and then you've technically beat Minecraft. But I know a lot. Like, you don't even have to like beat him to enjoy Minecraft. I know people have never even gotten to that part of the game, and they just enjoy it. But with
Yeah.
that, it's like I don't know. I don't see the point of making Minecraft into a movie because it seems the opposite of the appeal. Because narrative is not the appeal. It's about doing what you want. And, it's not really something you can capture in a film. So I don't get it
Yeah,
very
I
much.
feel like it's
It probably will
also
be really bad, but we'll see.
I don't know. I mean, it's also
Mhm.
live action, which is just weird to me because I feel like it's going to be harder to capture the world that way because like if it's live action, I feel like animation just has like more potential in that way. And I feel like live act I don't know. I feel like it'd just be hard to adapt the world like through live action
Yeah.
in that way. I don't know. They could do something interesting with it. Like I said, we don't know much, but I think there's like a plot synopsis. I don't know if it's 100% true, but it sounds like kind of generic. I think it's about a young girl and her group of friends going on some epic journey to defeat the Ender Dragon. So like yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't sound all that appealing, and I don't really know. Like, I don't know. It just sounds kind of generic, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't even that big of a Minecraft person, so I would not like. I'm like, oh no, you're gonna ruin Minecraft. I don't know.
Yeah,
Regardless,
I don't know.
not
I
hugely
don't know how
into it.
bad could this movie be. Like, I don't think it'll be that
Arcade would be better.
bad. I don't freaking know. I don't have the highest expectations for it, but I'll definitely be seeing it to see what it'll be. There's rumors that Jack Black will specifically playing Steve, which
Yeah, it
for
would
a
just be
while I
silly.
didn't
It feels
even.
like a parody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It sounds like a joke, like a SNL skit or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't really have much else to say. I just know that like Jack Black and Jason Momoa are in it, so we'll see what they do. And hopefully
Oh,
the movie is interesting. We
yeah.
will see. We'll probably talk about it when it comes out next year. So yes, I guess stay tuned for that if you're interested. Anyways, I guess that's like all the interesting news, if I'm being honest. So I guess now we're gonna get into our very first movie today, the original Back to the
Yeah.
Future. It's a pretty
Brow,
iconic
brow.
trilogy, probably one of the most iconic and
Yeah.
influential film trilogies. And like how I
It's
said,
one of the only trilogies that has not been ruined, which
that's
I
true.
greatly applaud Zemeckis for. Because see, here's the thing. Robert Zemeckis, he's a very director. I talked about this a bit when we did our Pinocchio in the very first episode of this podcast. That's
Yeah,
crazy to think about. But I remember, see, Zemeckis has a weird filmography where he has this streak of just fantastic movies with like greatly structured everything. And then the two and he makes like Dolores. That's Christmas Carol 2009.
yeah,
Pinocchio 2022. You get it. He fell off massively, and it's very
yeah.
sad to
But he
see.
did
But
make
one thing I do
some
respect him
iconic
for,
movies like
yeah.
this,
What I
and
do respect though is Zemeckis has specifically put his foot down and been like, you know what? No,
yeah, he's
we're not doing
refused
that.
the idea
He,
of ever making a
yeah,
fourth film for this
and
franchise.
he kind of fucked up. There might be a fourth film if he like dies or something, which is
That
very
would be
morbid. But I see
fucking mess.
Hollywood
That would
doing
just
that.
piss. That would piss a lot of
It
people
would be
off.
so messed
That
up,
would be
but I
so.
can see it
Yeah,
happening.
I could
But
see it happening too.
yeah, I don't
Like I
know.
remember, I don't know. I don't think there was like a. I don't know if this was ever true, but I don't know. There was like rumors of a remake with Tom Holland. Thank goodness it never happened. But who
Yeah,
knows what will happen?
that
Because
never
Robert
happened. I
Zemeckis has
did.
always like
I,
attempted to stop it at every turn. So let's hope that he could
yeah.
like continue to keep this franchise a trilogy. I was gonna say earlier, but like with Whiplash I had last episode, I also now owned Blu-ray for all three of these movies. And when I was
Hmm.
watching it to
Oh,
prepare for
nice.
this
Nice.
episode, Robert Zemeckis specifically
Mhm.
said that he wanted only three films, that he thought it was such like a clean number and good way to
Yeah,
begin this trilogy. So it became such
I
an
agree.
iconic
Like,
film series in nearly every way, and just everything about it
exactly. And then
has.
I don't know, three really hones out. You could just stick to one, but that's like a thing I'll get into. But anyway, I guess they just to explain briefly. So Robert, this came from Zemeckis, obviously the director of all
Yeah,
three of
and
these, and the idea came from it when he was working with his colleague Bob Gale. I think
oh
he like
Bob Gale,
on
yes.
working one of their earlier movies. He found his high school yearbook, and he was like, man. Well, no, like no, not his dad's high school yearbook, and he was looking at it, and he
Oh
noticed how like
yeah,
different he
yeah.
was compared to
I
how he
remember
was
this.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was like, "All right, would I actually be friends with my dad if I was like the same age he was in high school and ever?" And and from there, that obviously pays into the idea of Back to the Future. From there, he further developed the idea, and amongst other stuff, a bunch of other development, it got off the ground. And yeah, 1985's Back to the Future happened, which I think this is a bold claim, but I think Back to the Future One is one of the most like perfectly structured movies you could ever make. Not like a perfect movie, but the way it's like written and structured and how payoffs and setups work,
Yeah, it's an
I hadn't seen a
amazing
movie
movie.
like that at the time, and genuinely first time watching it, it blew my mind. It was one of the first movies like, how the fuck did they do that?
Yeah,
It's
it was a
crazy to
very
me, honestly. But
expertly written movie, and I
yeah,
think you might
very
know
formative
this,
for me
but it was
personally.
like one of the.
Yeah,
I think well, I forgot the full thing. Let me try and remember it. Yeah, I think they were gonna call originally one of the guy who like owned the corporate company that I think was gonna make this movie, named Sid Sheinberg. He wanted this movie to be called Spaceman from Pluto at one point. I don't know if you fully know this,
yeah, they
but
did, and it's so
it's
like,
so stupid. And they just like and they just did not like the idea. And I
yeah,
think the guy wanted to be like hip with the kids by having something like that.
Mm.
Which
The idea
how
got
does
pitched
that?
around to like a bunch of different
Yeah, it's
studios.
so
The whole
weird. Why
thing.
is the?
I think for a while Disney wanted it. I know that,
Yeah, but
and
they
it's
didn't
kind of
like the
similar to what
incest.
happened with yeah, yeah. No, that's the whole thing. They weren't into that, and the whole thing was it's kind of what happened with Nightmare on Elm Street that we talked about like
Oh
earlier. Disney
yeah,
wanted it, but they were gonna sanitize it and make it like not of their own
yeah.
essentially,
That's what it
which
probably
I think
happened
would
in
have been
movies
like
made by
bad
Disney.
because this movie's kind of mean spirited in a lot of aspects, but then the kind of humor of the movie, and you can't really do that under like a different lens. But ultimately, they went to Universal. They had full creative freedom. A lot of the ground. Spielberg was friends of Zemeckis, and he was like, if you don't know, Spielberg was like, he produced a lot of shit around this time. So it's like, you know what? They gave him the platform to do this, and then Back to the Future happened, and it's great, very good, even one might say.
Yeah, it's a
One of
great
my
it's a
all-time
it's a
favorites.
it's a great movie and I've loved it for quite a while. I think I first watched this movie during the pandemic and then from there I was like actually it might have been earlier. I don't fully remember, but I remember
Mm.
just having a great memory of watching this movie. And I remember just being like mind blown by like the cool time travel stuff. And I always thought like
Yeah.
time travel was such a cool concept for a movie. Now, it's kind of a very
Hmm.
easy thing to fuck up in terms of logic. And like if there's like a and even the sequels of these movies can kind of like fall into that, but I think this movie like does a great job at writing it in ways that like make sense and work well, you know?
Yeah. See, I watched Back to the Future around the same time. I credit this with three other movies as being my main formation as to how I appreciate art in the same way I do. It's a little dramatic, but let me hear me out. It was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and The Truman Show, all of which affected me for different reasons. Those other two movies, I think we'll eventually talk about it someday. But to
Yeah,
focus on this one
hopefully.
specifically, I remember I watched it and I was like, okay, it really taught me how like well written a movie could be with like how well this movie's structured, because I had never seen anything like this before. How meticulously this movie sets up beats and pays them off. And like this movie is one of the most perfect act ones out of anything I've seen. Let me just like
Yeah,
to
it's
run
great
down. So
setup.
you get so much info without it even being told to you, and a lot of it is paid off later, but it's not even like explained. The very opening, right? It's like an iconic thing. You're hearing the news report about the plutonium, and you
Great
see
foreshadowing right
Doc's lab.
there,
You
which is
see
very common in this movie.
exactly, yeah, they bring that back later, and you see the clocks. You see this meticulous thing Doc has set up for his dog Einstein. It has see all that everything's flowing so meticulously, and without even knowing anything about him, we're like, oh, Doc likes science. He loves these meticulous like science shit. You get his whole thing, and you get that even further by when Marty comes in. He's like, Doc, you've been missing for like a week, which shows yeah he's like very dedicated to his craft, and you see that for that there, and you see that through all of his inventions. He doesn't say that, but you get it, and that's a sign of very good character writing. Marty is the same way because he comes in and it's one of the most like I think iconic shots in the movie. He comes in, he plays his amp, and then he like fucks up the lab because he goes Bwah! He's knocked on the floor. And from there
Yeah.
you get he's a little reckless, and then everybody's like, "Oh, I'm late for school," and then he goes to go get immediately. He's very confident. He loves his playing, but he's reckless because he's late for school. And then there's this other shot after that where they play the great Huey Lewis music, by the way, the Power of Love song. They're
Oh
going
yeah,
through
great music
and they're
choice.
just showing all of the town. And that isn't even like doing anything. In the moment, just oh, he has to go to school, so you're gonna see like Hill Valley, the town. But that's very meticulous because they show you all the details as Marty's going to school, but you need that so when it's 1955, you see the contrast because when he arrives in 1955, they show like everything again. Even a good music contrast because when Marty's going around, they play the 80s music, and when it's in the 50s, they play Mr. Sandman, which shows the contrast in the music and contrast of how everything looks.
Yeah,
It's all
that's
just
nice.
super well written, and they have so many setups and payoffs like that. Ah, it's so
Yeah.
so good. Fuck man.
There's also like just a lot of fun mentions. One of the best payoffs, which I think we'll talk more about once we like get through like the characters and the overall climax of the movie, which is really get damn good. But
Yeah,
a
yeah.
great thing about it is like one of my favorite setups has to be the clock tower thing with like at first
Mm.
you see this lady's kind of like trying
Yes.
to
Oh,
save
I
the
love that.
historical landmark, and then
Save the clock tower. And it's so okay. I love that part because it works on so many levels. Because it's a funny joke, right? Marty and Jennifer are like alone. They're about to kiss or whatever, but then she comes in, she cock blocks him instead. She's like, "Save the clock tower," and it's funny because it makes it the context. She's an old lady. She's supporting this cause. She mentions all this stuff. You don't need first viewing. You think nothing of that. Just a thing. But when they go back to the past, that clock tower is what's gonna get them back to the future, and it's like, oh, it's so meticulous because you don't even think about that as a payoff, but perfect setup, natural payoff when Marty's talking to Doc about like the electricity and the clock tower. Oh my god. It's so well structured how everything's like put together. It's like genuinely really commendable. I love all that.
yeah,
Man,
yeah, it's
perfect.
a lot of cool details like that. Another fun mention is the mention is when Marty's mom mentions their uncle Joey being in prison, and then later when he travels back in time, he sees a baby Uncle Joey, and then he says, "Better get used to those bars, kid." And that's a funny joke. I like that. There's like it's a
Yeah.
nice joke. This
Yeah,
movie is
oh, I
pretty
love
funny.
that.
A lot of
It's
clever, funny jokes
yeah. Mhm.
that I
The
caught.
whole I like that part because they don't even another thing they do is when he's in the prison when he's in the crib he's wearing this like black and white striped clothing which looks like a prison outfit. They don't call attention to that, but that's a funny like parallel thing they do there. But additionally, see, there's like that all that opening and everything is like to talk about more setup because I think the first act is really good. See when so Marty plays and that's the whole thing. He like starts doubting his own abilities. He says the whole thing about like if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. That is called back when he says that to his dad in the past, and that like sets off the whole thing. But not even just that. So when Marty gets back to the house, he's talking to they see Biff and George, his dad, talking. Which by the way, um Biff is one of the my fucking favorite characters
Oh
in
my
this. He's
god, he's
so
so
funny.
funny. He's
He's
one of
like,
the funniest characters in this franchise.
yeah,
Just his like attitude and overall like way he like bullies people like George. It's just so
yeah,
funny
it's
to me.
so
The
fun.
performance is really
Yeah,
good, especially really adds to this character, you know. There's just a lot
yeah.
of
If
I
you
feel
didn't
like the
notice,
funniest moments in this franchise kind of come from him in a lot
yeah.
of ways. He's a fun
Yeah,
character.
fun fact, Biff is played by Thomas F. Wilson, who, if you didn't know, he's not in much other stuff, but he was on SpongeBob as the Tattletale Strangler and
Oh my
the
god,
bully
I
and the
hear the
bully.
voice now. If you when you
Yeah,
address
so if you
that.
notice that, it makes it even funnier because
That's
I
so
remember I was like,
funny.
oh, where's he from? Oh, it's from the yeah, it's funny that the voice is from
Yeah.
there. But anyway, so it's
Apparently he's a really
it
nice guy in person too, so it's kind of funny to see him
yeah. Oh my god, he's
play
super nice apparently,
play
which
this
is very
bully.
funny
Yeah,
considering his
and he did a great
characters.
job at
But
playing a bully, so that's funny.
yeah, he does so good. And the thing is, so they have the conversation where Biff, he's talking to George. He's talking about like how he didn't get like his thing in time. He's like, well, I gotta have time to retype it. And then he says all these things like he messes with him this little thing. Don't be so gullible, McFly.
Don't
All
be
that
so
dialogue.
gullible.
It's very funny, but it's very meticulous. Because when they go to the 50s, he says that exact same shit to him, and the whole thing is really clever and how it shows these people have not learned anything, and it how
Yeah.
history repeats itself. George is not like he's the same person he was in like the 80s. He's still the same pushover, still the same thing. So you could argue it's lazy that they're repeating dialogue, but no, it's very meticulous. You need all
Yeah, it
this
really
stuff
shows
to be
stuff
per.
about these characters, and it's honestly kind of sad seeing them like continuing this behavior throughout the
Yeah, yeah.
entirety of their lives.
Mm.
Like obviously
His
it is also
okay.
shown in the present that like Biff is still acts like similar to how he was as a young as like a young high school kid, but he still like acts
Yeah,
like a little different in it, but he still like talks the same way, you know. He still
yeah.
has
He has
like
the
the
same
same
mannerisms,
attitude and
and
mannerism, yeah.
yeah, and it shows that he's just like essentially the whole thing they get with Biff is Biff. He's like bossed his way through life. He's because he's not like he like no one says no to Biff. So when George comes up to me, he's a
Yeah,
pushover
George is the
essentially. He's like
opposite.
getting his
He's taken like the easy way out. You know, he's just a coward. And I feel
yeah
like it was basically said in like the behind the scenes thing that this movie like is specifically was about when they were writing it was specifically trying to show an arc with like George more than Marty himself. And when we get into the sequel soon, they also gave like Marty an arc of his own, which is why it wasn't like a full
Yeah, I'm
blown
not
sequel
okay.
since they were focusing
That's
on
not
something
something I'm
else.
super into. We'll get to it 2 and 3. I think Marty's arc is a little weirdly structured, but yeah. No, back to this. So the point is that even with that, like the dialogue's very well set up there. But even the scene where they're all eating at dinner, it's everything. Every line of dialogue is chosen very specifically. Where Lorraine, Marty's mom, was talking about, oh, I never chased a boy or
Oh, I
kissed
love.
a
Yeah,
boy, and it's
that's
supposed
a great
fun. It's funny because
that's
yeah,
some
it's
funny
funny because supposed to
irony.
create a contrast. Because in the past, she's so the opposite, and they mention all these lines. Okay, the dance where they fell in love, all that stuff. It's very yeah. So you need to know when that happens in the past. The mentioning of him getting hit by the car, all that's important because Marty fucks all that up. And even another thing, even like little jokes they do as well. Because there's this bit right where George acts pathetic and he's watching like this
The
rerun of
freaking bird
Jackie
watching
Gleason on the
peeping
TV.
Tom thing is
Yeah,
so funny.
yeah. Oh, I love that bit too. That's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's
He's a
both.
peeping Tom.
Yeah, the
This movie's
freaking.
very quotable, by the way. That's another aspect that has really well. But yeah,
Yeah.
no. And George laughing at the TV, it sets up a joke in the past when Marty's like, I've seen this one. This is a classic. And he's like, well, what do you mean you've seen it? It's brand new. And it's because, like, that's the first airing of it ever. But you have that in even little
What?
jokes like that are given the proper setup they need. And it's really well written
Yeah, there was a
stuff.
lot
It
of
just,
thought put
I've
into
never
the
seen a movie like
script.
that. It's so cool. And even little details you notice are really like well done. When Marty goes to check up on Doc, it's a Twin Pines Mall. But when he goes to the past, he knocks a tree over. So when he goes back to the present,
Hmm.
it's the Lone Pine Mall because only one
That's
tree.
really
It's a
good
little
detail.
detailed.
Holy cow.
They don't call attention to it, but it's really cool too. And all this like the everything is just very, very well put together. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, you don't notice it because this movie is hilarious. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah, it's
That's
a
the
really
thing.
funny movie.
Like it's you one thing for a comedy movie would be as well structured as it is, but really it is all well put together.
There are a lot of
This movie
cool,
is like
funny
the
jokes
key
made
of
by like the time travel premise. Like one of my favorite jokes for some
yeah,
reason, and it's like it's not like hysterical, but I just like laugh at it because I thought it was kind of clever. Is that it's a common theme in all of these movies, but like Marty constantly uses the term heavy to describe certain situations, and
yeah.
then in one specific scene,
Oh,
Emmett
it's like
keeps pointing this out, and then he assumes that in the future there's something wrong with the Earth's gravitational pull, and I just find
yeah,
that
oh, it's
really
such a
funny.
stupid line. It's
Yeah,
such a
it
such a
makes
stupid line.
sense
Marty's like,
though.
"Oh, this is heavy," and Doc's like, "What is with you in that word? Does the world have a greater gravitational pull?" It's
Yeah,
such a silly line, but so we quoted it up the top, and I find it so funny. The line at the beginning when Marty's trying to prove that he's like from the future. He's like, "Who's the president in 1985?" He's like Ronald
Ronald
Reagan.
Reagan,
It's like Ronald Reagan,
the
the
actor.
actor,
Yeah,
which
apparently
is very
the
funny. No
real
other
Ronald
like.
Reagan
Yeah.
like saw this
Yeah,
movie
he
and
started as
quoted
like
and
a
thought it was
TV actor
hilarious.
before. Yeah, it's very funny actually because it's weird that a president had a journey like that. But it's like Donald Trump, you know. He started on Home Alone 2 and then he became the president.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah,
But anyway, I love that line later when like he's showing him like the camera. He's like, "Oh, no wonder your president's an actor. He has to look good on TV." So many like quick throwaway lines like that are
yeah.
it's just so funny to me. I love um character wise, this movie is really good because okay. I go back and forth on this, but my favorite character joke wise is either George or Biff. Biff is
But
hilarious in his manners, how he doesn't change. He's just a
hello,
pushover.
anybody
But
home? I find
he's
it
like,
so funny
think
to me.
McFly, think. George is so funny because the guy is the biggest pushover imaginable. He is such a pussy. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I
Like I
like
love it.
how
Like yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
go
I
on.
like how the whole reason he tries to ask Lorraine to the dance is because basically Marty dresses up as like this alien from this comic book, and then he pretends to be Darth Vader, and then he just like blasts music in his ears like
Mm,
just to
yeah.
convince him. There's actually like a full deleted scene
Mm.
that's like extending
I was
the
gonna note
Blu-ray,
that. Yeah, there's
and
a
it's
full
actually
whole
really
thing in that.
funny, like the deleted scene. I
See,
can
that's
understand why they might
yeah.
move it. Maybe they just thought it like
Mm.
went on for too long, but it would still be
Yeah.
really funny, like the whole thing.
Yeah, see, I saw the thing, Robert, on the DVD or Blu-ray, you can notice they have the deleted scenes. And the thing with those is, I think, the scenes on their own are really funny. Like I've seen that full thing. It goes on for like a minute. Like Marty as a spaceman is like interrogating George. It's really funny.
Yeah.
And there's another scene later where it's supposed to explain why George doesn't come right away when Biff shows up. He gets like trapped and like I think like I don't know, like a phone booth or
Oh
something. And
yeah,
it's a
yeah, I
funny scene.
remember that one.
Yeah, and it's a funny scene on its own, but I think both scenes are they were worth cutting out because this movie has such a good flow to it. Like I think the Darth Vader thing from Planet Vulcan I think is very funny because you see George wakes up he's like I am Darth Vader from Planet Vulcan and they cut to George just blasting it to Marty. He's so scared and it's a very
Just the
funny
look
like
on
quick
his face
comedic
is so
cut.
funny. Speaking
Mm.
of which, Crispin
Yeah, he's
Glover
like
does a
lost
great
it.
job
It's
at playing
hilarious.
George
But
McFly. Like the performance and overall like nerd attitude, it feels very genuine. You
mhm.
know, it's great. I don't think
Yeah.
they weren't able to get Crispin Glover back for the sequels though. But I mean, he
And then
doesn't
okay,
appear
there's
in
a
it
whole
much,
thing.
so
There's a whole thing with Glover and the other ones where okay, I think so. George, I think he didn't like the direction George's character went in Back to the Future, like the ending of this one, because he didn't like the idea. He took it as see at the end because George is able to be more confident. When Marty goes back to 1985, everyone is much more like well off. They're doing much better financially. George has become a famous writer, and he took that as oh, the ending's better because he's more like wealthy, I guess. And he didn't like that message that money like gives you happiness. I think he had a fundamental misinterpretation of the message because it's
yeah.
not just oh George is well off. It's oh George was able to write his stories and become successful because he had self confidence and everything. So I don't know. It was weird with the whole thing, but I'll get at
Yeah, it kind of
there's a
has like
whole thing
a
with
there's
Glover and the
overall
other
just like an
movies.
interesting
But,
message on time travel with how like if we can like if there's a way if we can like fully like identify the mistakes or we might have made like in the past, we can learn to correct them and they could have like a massive change in your life. And that's what I like about the ending because it's like payoff to that
mhm.
idea. It's like an interesting direction to take time travel. And I feel like yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a great direct. I think this is like one of the films that uses like time travel the best. Let's be if I'm being honest.
Oh,
Of all the people,
100%.
definitely
See,
yes.
I love the simplicity of it. It's like if for a movie about two and three get a little more like up and down with it, but I like in this one. It's very simple. They go in 1985. Marty goes back. He goes back again. It's very simple. You don't have a lot of jumping around to do, but it's all very like it's for a movie that's so seemingly simple. It has all these little intricacies to it that I love too. Like all the again, I could talk about the details of the movie like forever because they're so fucking many. But even yeah, it's just so well put together. I think okay, another detail I really like is in the future they're not the future, in the present they're like you see a ad for re-elect Mayor Goldie Wilson, and then they go back to 1955 and they feel like oh Marty was the one who encouraged him to want to become mayor. It's like a cool payoff there. I like that scene a lot. And yeah, and like there's just a lot of other details like that. I think one thing I noticed is when Marty goes back to 1985 at the end, there's this like homeless guy on the bench. Uh and if you notice, the that homeless guy on the bench is apparently the same guy who's supposed to be the mayor in 1955. If you notice, it's the same actor.
Oh,
I find that really funny. That's like a
that's
it's
funny.
it's a funny detail. But
Yeah,
yeah, such simple like bits like that, such simple jokes. They're
yeah.
all
I
like
yeah.
so
I find it like funny that like they just put the Goldie Wilson joke as just like a funny little
yeah.
detail that shows
He's
that
good.
Marty
Yeah.
probably like changed the timeline a little bit with that, but really not
It,
much because he still
the
ends
whole
up in the
thing
same
with that
position.
stuff, it's not a criticism technically, but something I've always found weird about this movie where they're like these weird details where apparently Marty sets up stuff, but how did those things even happen in the first place if Marty was the one who caused it? Like, okay, look, there's this whole thing where at the climax, Marty's playing the song Johnny Be Good, and the guy he's calling up, and he's like, "Hey Chuck, it's your cousin Marvin. Marvin Berry. You know that new sound you're looking for? Well, listen to this." And he puts up the
Yeah,
song.
Marty
It's implied
probably
that that
just
caused
like
him.
yeah,
It's weird. That implies that it caused him to create the song Johnny Be
yeah.
Good.
So Chuck
But,
Berry is
like,
basically
the
a
song already
plagiarist now.
exists. So how does that work? It's weird. Unless it's implying that he coincidentally would have made that song anyway, which I don't.
Yeah,
It's weird how that whole thing's worked to me. I never got it, but
yeah.
it's a
I don't know.
funny,
It's like a funny
funny.
little
Also at
joke.
the end when yeah. I love that joke. It's such a good bit.
Yeah, I like
Also
how he
when at
turns
the
like
end
this
when Lorraine's
artist
like
into a
yeah.
plagiarist. I find that funny.
Yeah, yeah. Also, the end when Lorraine's like Marty, that's a nice name. It doesn't even make sense because he has that name anyway. It's not like that caused it to be in her head. I don't know. That's something that I've always found weird. Those like particular jokes, but who cares? It's funny anyway.
Yeah,
I
and
like all the little bits.
yeah, one thing I like about the time travel by the end of this movie is I feel like, I feel like it actually makes sense why certain things still ended up the same, like how Marty is still in a relationship with Jennifer, and Marty still is like aware of Doc and whatnot. I feel like that makes sense since it is established that like a part of the reason Marty the way he is because like he has like a lot of like different parts of his life that are completely different to his home life because of like the new generation he's grown up in, which also makes sense why his a younger mom would fall in love with him in some way because Marty is shown to
Yeah,
be much more like cooler and advanced compared to like other kids
yeah,
at the times and they were like there's a lot of like thought put into that like trait
yeah.
with his
It's
character that make like the
the whole
time
thing
travel
becomes
so
really uncomfortable. The premise is inherently uncomfortable. It's like,
yeah.
oh, we got to make sure he doesn't fuck his mom. It's very, very weird. But it's so funny to me. These like, it's perfect cringe comedy. These scenes where Marty's trying to go, oh, you got to go to George, but his mom is much more infatuated with him than like he should. That's so funny. Like these scenes where Marty's just trying to get out of it, but his hole gets kept digging like further and further
Yeah.
like like the scene where there's the chase scene when Marty like attacks Biff and he's riding away and he puts him into the manure, which is another scene there in all of these movies because the whole theme of this trilogy is history repeating itself and that you can change your own
Yeah,
history.
that's
But
cool.
this whole thing happens with Marty and then that gets Lorraine to like Marty even more and it's just everything. It's so funny. Everything just goes like the worst possible way it even could. It's very clever, the whole thing. I love it. Okay, one of my favorite bits of character writing is when Lorraine's coming in to check on Marty, and she's like talking about like, oh, Calvin, and Doc just has this look on his face where he's staring at Marty, and he's so fucking pissed off without even saying anything.
Yeah.
He's like, Marty, you're supposed to get it with your dad. It's oh my god, it's so funny. Doc in general is a great
Yeah,
character,
Christopher
like
Lloyd
just
does a
so.
great job at playing him
Oh,
specifically.
I love him,
It's weird because Christopher
love him.
Lloyd has been in so many shitty movies. I don't know if you know this. Like he's been in
Yeah,
shit
yeah.
like Food Fight and Baby Geniuses. There's a lot of
Oh,
shitty
yeah.
movies he's been in, believe it or not. But this is easily
Oh, he
like
was in
one
Hey
of his
Arnold
most
the
iconic
movie.
roles.
Worst role. But yeah, he did. I don't know. Honestly, I think it was just because like he only got to be with like people who did like recognize him. Because I don't know Zemeckis, he was also in Who Framed Roger Rabbit
Oh
as
yeah, he
the
played the villain.
oh,
Yeah,
he
I
it?
sometimes forget
Yeah, he
about
played
that.
the
Yeah,
villain of that movie, and he's great there. I don't know. The
yeah,
'80s, he's in some good stuff. I don't know if you've seen Clue. Clue is a really
yeah.
fun
Clue's a
movie, and
pretty
he's
good
really good
movie.
in
He's
that.
he's fun in
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and he's in like the Adams Family's Man on the Moon with Jim Carrey. Like he had a lot of good stuff. I guess he just doesn't get hired for a lot of good stuff later, which is kind of sucks. I really do like him a lot
Yeah,
in his
he's.
roles here, and he
I
got
can't imagine anyone in this role. Same thing with Marty, because he was supposed to be played by Eric
man,
Stoltz, which is like a
yeah, which people if you watch The Flash, you would know
yeah,
because they
yeah.
fucking
What a
love that joke.
yeah,
But
what a great joke.
yeah, 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 but the whole thing is, if you didn't know, Michael J. Fox, it was because he was doing a sitcom at the time, Family Ties, which was running, and he had this whole like very weird schedule where he'd work most of the day on Family Ties. He'd get a couple hours of like
Mhm.
upwards of like maybe 3, maybe 4 hours, and then he'd have to go work on Back to the Future, and then he'd have to go to Family Ties, and he repeated that schedule on loop as he was doing both projects at the same time, so he could balance both things. And it was terrible because he was like worked to death, but I don't know. It kind of I maybe a channeled in his performance because he is great in these movies.
Yeah.
Michael has this just very natural he has a very natural charisma. I think they were right to pick him from the role because for someone like Marty, you need someone who's like well one you need someone who's like really cool, I guess, so that Lorraine's like, oh man, Marty's cool, and to create a contrast because he is so self confident, and you see like George, and I was like, man, this guy's a pussy. It's supposed to show like that direct disconnect, and Michael does that perfectly, where he has this like just raw energy to him, and it really like comes out when he's like playing off other characters, like he does with Doc, the great dude there. And oh my god, the scenes with Marty and George in the past are so funny
Yeah, those are
because he's just like trying to amp him up, but George is such a pussy. It's hilarious. Like, come on,
yeah,
get a grip, man. Very, very funny. Um, but we're talking a lot about jokes and setups and payoffs. On a more emotional level, this movie works very well. I love the whole thing leaves a very strong impression because Doc he gets shot near the beginning and it's like fuck, he's dead. Well, at least you think he because he's shot by the Libyans, which again is set up really well in the opening. They mentioned the plutonium and the missing,
yeah.
and then Doc explains that they got shot down.
That's
But and I think
coincidentally
for
in Doc's
mm,
home. Interesting. At the
yeah,
exact same time, and he's not home. You know, it's like
yeah.
interesting foreshadowing, I guess. But
It
like,
creates good intrigue there.
yeah,
But
like, ooh, what's this
uh,
plutonium thing? Is it gonna come back?
yeah.
Who knows? And
And see, I think in another movie, the tone change would be like a little weirder, where like, Doc died, but now we're going back to like the 50s, and there's like it's much more lighthearted then. But I think the whole thing is becomes much more easier to me to understand because like one, Marty has a lot of shit on his plate right now. Doc is not the first thing; he's literally like in a different time period. Despite that big thing, he's probably not thinking about that first, and
yeah,
also it makes it because now he's in the past. He's not really sad about him dying because he's right there. He's like there, and it creates a good core because Marty's like Doc's like you can mess with it, and then Marty's like he's trying to tell me I have to tell you about the future on the night I go back and the whole thing like the whole
yeah,
and it creates such a sweet scene when Doc is alive and he's like he like actually did read the note. It's like he had a bulletproof vest and it's so sweet 'cause
yeah.
he's
And
like
unlike,
he told I
and
thought
then
you
he
said not
like
to
just
mess with
kind of
it. And it's
ditches
like
his like
so
old beliefs of how
sweet.
like not corrupting the space time continuum. And some people might say hey, that's like a weird thing for him to randomly change his mind. But if we're being like realistic here, there's been like so many years. I feel like based off of Dark living in such like more like isolation from everyone else, it's kind of like it wouldn't be like that far fetched if he just like one day decided and you're like, fuck this space time continuum thing. I'm gonna read this letter. Like, I feel like that's like a realistic thing, and I feel like that intrigue is also like I'll talk about this when we get to the third film, but that intrigue is like really well foreshadowed in like a line in the third film. So like I think that ending works well with the bulletproof vest. I think that actually makes
Yeah,
sense.
no. I think it works like well enough. Nothing's like again, this movie is very well of like the setup and the payoff of it all. And I think you buy more that like because obviously Doc and Marty I think what another thing I really like about this movie, they don't like explain their relationship too much. They're like Marty is friends with this old guy. And you get from like that scene where they're talking in the opening and when they're demonstrating time travel, you don't need to go Marty and Doc, they met at blank. They are good friends. You get it. You don't
Yeah,
need to
it's like it's
explain
one of
that, which
those
is
duos where like they're friends at the very beginning and you can already
Mhm.
understand their dynamic just with the
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
scenes they
Like,
share
and they
together.
play off each other really well. Like Jay Fox and Christopher Lloyd, they're like both so good as we've said. And I think you buy it more because in the past, like they developed this like further bonds. It's like Doc's like, okay, yeah, and then he eventually does it, and it's a sweet scene at the end there. Not even just that, because there's like this movie kind of has two climaxes. I guess I'll describe it. There's him already getting back and all that, which is one, and then fuck this. The second, the first is when George like stands up for himself, and that becomes a whole thing where he like learns from that. And both scenes are so good. The clock tower scene is it's in all three movies because at the end of two, beginning of three, and one obviously. I think it's because they knew how good a scene it was. Because for the soundtrack, it's amazing. The rising tension, it's like brr brr brr. Brr, 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 brr,
Oh yeah, the
brr.
score of this
That's
movie
so
is amazing. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's
Soundtrack,
like yeah, it's
score,
amazing all
it's
that
all great.
they
The
do
instrumentals, like in general, the entire climax of this movie just has such a thrilling, like tension. All of these,
Yeah,
like
this
honestly, all these movies have like great climaxes in their own ways. Like all
oh
of them, just
100%
they're all
the
like high stakes. The score really adds to them, and they're overall just like there's just something so thrilling, and the stakes are shown to be high. Seeing Marty
yeah
nearly fade out of existence with a bunch of bullies nearly
uh,
preventing them from like existence and whatnot.
yeah, the I will say the visual of Marty's hand dissolving looks a little weird, but it's fine. Everything else looks really good. I'll like give them that. But
Yeah,
yeah, the clock tower scene, I just the intensity of it is so high because they have one shot at this.
they have
That's the only
one
that can
shot, and
generate
they
the
can never.
1.21 gigawatts. That's the only that can get them that huge amount. So you're like, goddamn. And then the stakes, the music rising on an emotional level, because this is when Marty tries telling Doc. It's such a well constructed scene. Man, really really well done. All that. And that's a great climax too, especially like oh, I love the part when he gets back and Doc is just like so like fucking ecstatic. He's like, yeah, woo, yeah, baby. He's so happy at that. But that's not even like my favorite climax. The whole thing is. So when George, his thing where he becomes more self confident is so well done because George, obviously where he just punches Biff. It's like he gets like a. It's good because he gets a big moment there. Is like he gets his like self confidence.
There's
That's when
something like
Lorraine gets him to
so
go with George.
satisfying when he
And
like punches
it, yeah,
Biff,
he just
and
knocks him, and it's so satisfying because like Biff, he's like he has this overt confidence the whole movie where he thinks he can get away with anything. So when he actually sees him like knock, it's a satisfying thing. Even though he's a fun character, like
yeah,
yeah,
it's
you
kind of
go
funny
George.
too, just
But,
seeing this like egotistical asshole just being knocked down by this like
yeah, yeah,
nerdy
it's
kid
great.
for the first time, and then like
Yeah,
yeah, and
but
then George gets the
yeah,
girl, and this leads to him having more self confidence. Like, but it's like a
yeah.
very cool arc, especially since it's basically like implied before that the main reason Lorraine and George got together in the first place was because of like Lorraine just having pity for him, and it's like kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, it
sad, and
changes
seeing
like
like the
yeah,
opposite
it's
kind of happen would make, and that's why it makes such like a large amount of sense of why that would
mm,
overall like change.
yeah, yeah. I think a smart decision this movie does have though is so they have a brief moment where George punches him and that like knocks him out. However, the moment their thing is really cemented is during the Earth Angel scene where they're performing the song, which is great by the way. It fits a lot. And George he's dancing with like Lorraine, but he's still not. He's like better, but he's not quite in that I'm really confident stage.
Yeah,
So then what happens is but then like some guy fucking takes him. This is when the visual of Marty's like hand fading out, which is I love the whole thing. It's really trippy. Like the music starts fading, things get a little out of view because Marty like he might be gone if this doesn't happen. But then this is when George does it again. He like knocks her out and then he kisses her and then the music ramps up again. And it's a smart move because you could argue, oh, it's the same thing like twice. He stands up for her once, he stands up for her again. But I think that's a really important scene character wise because the whole thing is
yeah,
okay. George had this brief lapse of I'm more confident now, but we don't know if that's gonna stick. You know, people have momentary lapses where they don't act in character all the time, whether based on circumstance. That's just a human condition. But him doing it a second time confirms this is not just a fluke. George is more confident now. And that's when the
yeah.
music ramps up, the Earth Angel, and it picks up. And then the whole thing ends this really triumphant finish. It's such a
Such
good
a
scene. This
great
movie has
ending.
like such, oh my God, I love all that. It's so good. And yeah. Then the Johnny B. Good bit is after this, which I love that too. It's so I mentioned it earlier how I don't think it makes much sense, but it's a really good, great cover too. Michael J. Fox is good at singing. It's fun to
Yeah,
hear that
yeah,
too. It's funny how Michael just says something like oh my God, Marty. I don't know why I said his actor name. He's like all right, this one's he's like watch be riff for the changes and just follow along. Or they somehow play perfectly. I find
yeah.
that funny. But then the bit where he does a really long guitar solo and it's like and
And
then
then
everyone just
everyone
fucking
just
baffled,
reacts
which
weirdly to
uh,
it. That's funny.
it makes sense because it's in character because it's like well in the 50s people weren't doing fucking guitar solos in songs so they're like what the hell is that they don't get it and it's like and then that's why Marty says you might not have been ready for that yet but your kids are gonna love it and it makes sense because you know
Yeah.
they didn't have shit like that it's cool it's all just man I can't get over how well structured of a movie this is. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
pieces. It's so good. Mwah.
Yeah.
And you know, because this is one of the most parodied movies in pop culture. It's
That's
like
true.
everywhere. Everyone's. Yeah, it's so good. It spawned the Family Guy episode Meet the Quagmires,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
such a classic
it's
episode.
it's where the Peter dancing thing comes from. Classic, classic.
Yeah,
And another.
yeah. Performances,
But
like we already talked about the performances, they're all really good.
mhm.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
every single
I like
detail.
see
It's
even
really good.
characters who don't like actually get a lot. I like a lot. They do I love fuck I love Marty's brother Dave. He doesn't get much, but I love at the beginning they show he's like a slacker or whatever, and then he like laughs along to the TV really stupidly what George does, and then it's a good contra thing because then in the future he's like wearing nice clothes for like apparently has a nice office job now. Again, really selling that contrast. Like, whoa, that's really good. And then I don't know, Marty's sister doesn't do much either, but she's like fine
Yeah,
enough.
the siblings don't do
Jennifer,
too much in this
yeah, they
trilogy.
don't do much, but they fulfill their purpose. And I don't know. Jennifer doesn't do that much either, but I think she fills the role she needs to in this one because like again, it's another contrast thing. Marty has this girlfriend who loves him because he's so cool or whatever, and then you go to his mom. He's like, "I felt sorry for George. That's why we're married." Like, see, it's just to show how like sad it all is. But
Yeah,
it's so
it makes
oh
everything
man,
just have such great
yeah.
payoff and
Mm.
satisfaction. It's such a
Jennifer is like kind of weird in this one though because they had to recast her for 2 and 3, so I don't
yeah.
like I don't she doesn't do that much. Same with George, but that's like I'll get into that with
Yeah,
two.
but George is like
Uh
barely in the second and the third one, so yeah,
yeah.
but
It's a whole thing.
yeah, and
Um
yeah, this is such a this is just a great movie. I feel like just everything about it just like flows and works really
it
well.
all just works
Yeah.
so well. It man,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I
Let me see if I have like any other interesting
I
notes.
don't
I think
have
I
that
said
much
them.
more, but I have like one note. I think the one scene I didn't mention is like I love the scene where so Lorraine and Marty are in like are in the car right and so it's something where Marty just digs his hole further because he just says a bunch of shit and it's like Lorraine takes this like an advance on him and it's uncomfortable because he's trying to prevent this like incest and it's like ugh not feeling that but I know I love that part where they see that he's talking about how she's like smoking and like drinking, and the
Oh, I
whole thing
love
is
that
like
scene. You
she
smoke
yeah, it's so
dope.
funny because you see that in like the future that's like her vice, and you see this is where it like's beginning, and she like brushes it off, and like this is a funny contra thing. She's like, I stuck it from my old lady's liquor cabinet, and it's funny because it's like her being like so like against the rule book, when now she's in the future she's like hanging on to like the simple like things like, no, I would never go chasing boys and chasing a boy, and it's funny like the whole con. I love that
Yeah,
scene
great
too. It's
irony
so
there,
really
revealed and expanded
yeah.
upon later in the film.
There's so many just good scenes. I love when George is trying to like he's like, all right, he's like, all right, George, you gotta riz her up. And then George comes up and he's like trying to like he has a speech, but he's so bad at it. He's like, my density has popped me too. You're like, man, he is not doing it. He's so bad at it. It's so funny.
Yeah,
And you see where he's rehearsing it. George's like, do you have to swear? He's like such a fucking square.
yeah,
So funny. Ah man,
yeah.
I love
Just
this movie to pieces. As you can tell, there's just so
man,
many good
it's such a
scenes
great
and
classic, and
dialogue.
that's why to this day we're all still hoping that this is a trilogy that remains
Exactly. Hmm.
untouched, and yeah, and
I
have a
think it would
huge
be. It's like
cultural.
has a
I wouldn't be surprised if they do want to make a sequel because this film has such a huge cultural impact in nearly every way. So like, yeah, uh huh.
hmm. They've
Let's hope it
wanted to.
doesn't
They
happen.
certainly
Yeah,
have
people have
like
wanted
wanted
to,
to.
they think they can make a profit off of this. And like Michael J.
Yeah, yeah.
Fox and Christopher Lloyd might be getting like a bit older, sure, but they could probably
Well,
still
no,
come up with this
okay.
movie if they
If
really
you read up
wanted
on it,
to.
Michael J. Fox has had like a really like tragic life after this movie. Not
Oh
like directly
yeah,
after,
wait.
but he has like the
Oh.
yeah, I don't know if he has like the I forget the name, but he has this really bad like condition or whatever, and that's led to a lot of like problems for him like personally, and that's why after the 80s he wasn't that big star he was before. It's really sad stuff like if
Mm,
you look into it, but I think it's a big
I
reason
think
they
I've
I
heard
don't think they
about
could
that
do like a
somewhere. I think you just
yeah,
reminded
yeah.
me about it. But
Yeah,
like
it's all
still, I
super
feel like they
like
would at
sad
least put
stuff,
him
but
in for like a cameo or something if they would make a
they
fourth one.
would, they would. And I'm glad Zemeckis is like not apparently they're like Back to the Future. They did like a game for like the PS3
Yeah, they also
360
made
Wii,
like a. I
and that
think they
was
also made like a cartoon show with Dan
oh yeah, there
Castellaneta
is
playing
one, and
Doc.
I know that because on the Back to the Future DVD I have, they have like the first episode like put into it, and
Mm.
for memory that show just like weird. It's kind of funny. Every like big movie of like the 80s got a cartoon back then. You know, fucking RoboCop and Rambo got Saturday morning cartoons, even though those are for like
Yeah, it's kind of
those are
weird.
already targeting towards young children. It's so
Yeah,
weird.
it's
But yeah, the
weird.
cartoon didn't apparently the cartoon didn't last long, only
2
26
seasons, I
episodes
think.
across 2 seasons. Which
Yeah.
again, I don't, this isn't the time then that could last that much. And again, I don't know, the movie relies on the simplicity on its time travel, so it's stretching it out a bunch. It's not the most like I think
Yeah.
would be convenient, but yeah.
Um.
Da-da-da.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much else to say. I guess like a question that has plagued me, but it is still. I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are on it because I don't really consider it a flaw. But like when it comes to time travel, I think a lot of it works amazingly, and it's an incredibly well
Oh yeah,
written film in
definitely.
that
The
regard.
simplicity it works way better than most other time travel movies, and that's like a thing I
Oh,
can
definitely,
100% commend
100%,
for.
yeah. But
Yeah.
so when Morty goes back in time by the end of the movie, he wakes up to this whole new life. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to see what is your interpretation of the thing of like what happened to the Marty who lived all those lives, all those memories he spent because he doesn't have any memories of spending lives with this family. I think it's like a great and
My whole okay.
like I
I
just
think
want
it's
to
okay.
hear
My
your
whole
interpretation
interpret
of it.
see okay. My whole interpretation of that is I think what we can willing to guess is things still happened in a similar way because
Hmm.
of their situation. They have like a better
Yeah, that's
outlook
why
on.
he
Like one
still
thing.
knows Jennifer and Doc in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
So.
why exactly? My whole thing is see it's implied the experiment would still happen because we see the old like Marty like there at the beginning and then that's when Marty's like coming back. But the whole thing is what I took it as like when Marty comes back he create like a split where those events still happen but at a certain point they like split and they come
Hmm.
here. I think a lot of similar stuff still did like happen because still like I guess to explain what I mean. See at the beginning Marty's
Oh,
talking to
yeah,
Jennifer about how
yeah,
he's like
like the whole
yeah,
some
because he's talking
memories
to
might have
Jennifer
still
about like
happened.
yeah, he's talking
So.
about Jennifer about the whole like thing about like the car and all that, and he's like, oh, she thinks I'm going like camping with the guys and all that. Except now when Lorraine's talking to him, Marty's like, oh, we talk about the car, and Lorraine's like, oh, aren't you going with Jennifer Parker or something? And it's because the Marty still had that idea and it
Ah,
happened
that makes
similarly,
yeah,
but it's
that's
still
a good
close enough that he knows what's
interpretation.
going on, just a little like different
Yeah,
with it.
that's like
That,
a great way to
hmm.
see it, and I think I agree with you on
He
that
is very
definitely.
funny. Well, fucking pathetic Biff. He's hilarious. He's like fucking just
Oh my God, yeah, I
goofs
love
around.
modern Biff just being this like loser who
Now,
like, and I like how it's
now,
revealed that
Biff,
like
don't on me. It's so funny.
I like how it's
So
also
funny.
revealed like the deep down he still has like the same tendencies, but he just refuses to like show them to the McFly family and acts like this fun-loving guy who likes to who
He
just
is
work for
so
the
jovial. It's so funny. He's like,
yeah.
"Oh, Mr. Fly, your book just came in." So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very sad, but
Oh,
also
like,
really funny seeing this new version of
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love it
yeah.
personally.
So I think it's a good interpretation of the ending because I feel like, yeah, you're right. I feel like a lot of the same stuff might still like happen in terms of the some of the memories, but like some stuff might have changed still. So he might have forgotten some memories with his family, but I feel like none of it like doesn't make sense. So yeah, it's like a
Mm,
pretty like same rule, interesting rule of time travel. I think it's like yeah,
mm,
I think it makes sense. Yeah, I'd say it makes sense. Yeah, and it's
mm.
like yeah, yeah. I don't know what I was trying to say again, but yeah. Anyways, I think that's all I have to
Yeah.
say about this movie. Any other
Um, I
thoughts?
have um I have one brief thought, and it's less of a thought and more of just a tangential note. But I realized that where I'm like, uh, okay. So if you didn't know, Back to the Future is a big inspiration for Rick and Morty because Rick and Morty
Oh my
started out
god,
as this
I
thing called The
sometimes
Adventures
forget
of
about
Doc.
that. Like,
Yeah, it started out as The Adventures of Doc and Marty, and then that turned into Rick and Morty. And if you know me, I'm not a big Rick and Morty fan, which is very funny. One of my favorite movies spawned like this show. I'm very indifferent towards, but I think I realized something recently. There's a Back to the Future in, involves incest potentially happening,
oh my
and Rick and
goodness.
Morty, you know, just just something to think about.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Yeah, we all, yeah,
But
yeah. But speaking of
curse
that,
you,
I
Dan
remember,
Harmon. But
I don't know if you've
sorry,
seen
yeah.
them, but like there's even like online really small shorts that have Christopher Lloyd playing Rick from Rick and Morty. I don't know if you've seen those, but it's like a live action
I,
thing.
I, I did not know that.
Yeah, you
That's
could
funny.
search it up. It's like a live action Rick and Morty thing where like he plays Rick from Rick and Morty. It's kind of like a funny,
Ah,
it's kind of
that
interesting in
is
terms
funny.
of like seeing the original inspiration from Rick for Rick actually being played by the actor who played Doc. So like that's like
Oh, that's super
interesting.
funny.
Yeah. Like
I like,
and Rick and Morty is
man,
now a new
that's
iconic
hilarious.
modern duo. So it's kind of interesting how that show
Yeah,
has made like a whole new identity
but
for
see, that
TV.
is kind of as much as I make fun of Rick and Morty, it did not have impact, and it shows. Like another thing, I guess they took Back to the Future, made it their own thing, and that's their own spanking new art. Very neat movie, and I guess I don't know. We talked about it a bit, but the messaging of this movie,
Yeah, it's
it's
great.
nice. Put your mind to it, you accomplish anything. Very simple message, but it works. And it's another thing about get self confidence. You'll be better because that's what George gets. You know what? I know that's a lot of my favorite media. I like it when pussies become self-confident. Great theming. But anyway, Back to the Future. 10 out of 10 stinking movie.
For me, it's an amazing
Fantastic.
film, and I
Love it.
can't wait to watch it for again for years to come. It's like
Yeah,
very
one of my
happy we are
favorite just
talking about these
pieces of
movies
all
today.
time.
Especially for
Classic.
the big, nice,
Oh,
clean
100%,
40th
100%.
episode. So yeah,
Yeah. But anyway,
let's
so
get to
I
the
know. So I
sequel.
got
Ready for
this.
the sequel
So the sequel. Okay. So
of
for those of
Back
you
to
who
the
didn't know,
Future
the
Part
ending of
Two.
Back to the Future. Yeah, Back to the Future 2. So for those who don't know, the ending of Back to the Future 1, the whole scene where it's like, it's a kid's body. Something's got to be done about your kids. That whole thing. That was not intended to hook a sequel. The whole thing was supposed to be a thing where it's like, here we go again. The character's another wacky sci-fi adventure, except with Marty and
Yeah,
Jennifer. Robert Zemeckis did not intend to make another movie. However, the studio was like, all right, listen, buddy, you like if you're not gonna make a Back to the Future sequel, we will. And it was very ominous. It's the first movie that fucking gangbusters, critical darling, one of the highest grossing movies of that year. They were
yeah.
gonna make another one, and it was like we need more. It was like fuck. So Zemeckis was like, all right, I don't want someone else bastardizing these movies. I guess I'm gonna have to make this movie myself. So he went in. He made the two sequels. Back to the Future 2 and 3 were both written around the same time and then shot around the
Yeah,
same
even
time. They were
the
done
second
very late.
film ends with like a teaser for the third one, which came
Yeah,
out a
it
year
literally
later.
ends with a trailer from Back to the Future Part 3, which is very funny. But
Yeah,
yeah, so the point is they're very intrinsically tied together. And then so like, all right, you know what? We're making it. And Robert Zemeckis made Back to the Future Part 2. And I love this movie as well.
it's not
It's not as
as
good
good as the
as not as
first
good as the
film.
first,
It
but I
has
really like a
some
lot
flaws,
of what this one has to offer.
but it is a
Hmm.
really fun movie. It's like a blast to watch,
Oh,
and it's
oh,
still like
definitely. It's so
it still
fun.
uses the premise of time travel to create like a really cool and entertaining story. And
Yeah.
you still like
Yeah.
care about a lot of this stuff. So this follows
I
off the
have some mild
cliffhanger of
holes in
the
it, but that is not
yeah.
without my like love or
Yeah,
appreciation for all
I
of
have
them.
flaws
Um,
too. Like I think we'll get to this like later, but like the time travel in this movie makes less sense if in a lot of ways, and it can get kind
mhm,
of confusing compared to the first film. And it's not like a huge deal.
mhm,
Like there's still some like cool details with it, and there's still like and it's still like a
mhm.
fun adventure that uses it like
See, look, I'm
in
not one to
fun
complain
stuff.
about like plot conveniences a lot because it's not really the thing I overly care about. But with this one, however, there are certain points where I notice things, and it's like, honest, okay. There are so many scenes in this movie where I feel like a character should hear or see someone, but they don't, and it makes me really annoyed. Like,
Like the
this is
scene
one
with
part
Mr.
where,
Strickland and Marty in the
oh,
climax.
it makes me irrationally, I was like, he's there. You should see him. And to my knowledge, it's something that never really happens in the first one. So I'm like, come on, he's right there.
It's
Come
kind of
on.
funny, but also like kind of weird, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's always a little like knock I have again. And there's like scenes where like the old man Biff is sneaking around and he still doesn't like see him. It's like, come on.
come on.
Come on. And it happens. And I guess to not get my biggest knock out of the way right now. It's not even that it's a badly done arc. I just think it's weird. But the whole thing is so basically I think they realized that Marty has this whole thing in the first movie. He's like the one revolving the central conflict. So he's the
He gets a
like
chance
he doesn't really need to develop much.
to
Yeah,
fix his parents' life and overall just
yeah, because it's
improve
not.
it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really about his development as much. It's about George's because that's the movie about his change and how he gets better. It all makes sense. But the thing is, this movie okay. Together, like I think Zemeckis realized, okay, we can't have a Back to the Future movie where Marty doesn't have like something going on. They give him this whole arc in these other two where he gets, for some reason, he gets very self conscious when people call him a
The
chicken,
chicken or
and
yellow or
this
whatever.
apparently is supposed to lead to a lot of the bad things in his life because when he gets knocked, eventually that leads to him getting
The
into an accident, and then he can't play anymore, and essentially Marty
scooter,
becomes
yeah.
like worse than George was in the original timeline where it's like fuck, and it becomes this whole thing.
Yeah, he's having
And
financial issues, and he's like,
yeah,
yeah.
and the thing is, the whole thing is, I kind of okay, I like that in part. I think they get good things out of that. It's a good like arc. However, I think it's just a little random since it's not how Marty usually like acts in the first one. It's
I
like
think
it's a weird arc to randomly put in for
Yeah, I
me.
feel
I
like
never
the
was gelled
arc
with it
by
as
the
much.
conclusion it reaches in the third, I feel like if it was established like back in the first film, even like subtly, it doesn't have to be a big part of the movie, but if it was just established then, it would be much more like powerful for it to reach its conclusion in the third one. Like if they just thought of this
I would
arc and put
agree.
it and just like put it subtly in the first one. Like they didn't have to
Well, see,
focus on it at all because
yeah,
that's
well,
not what
see,
the
I
story's
the
about.
thing is they couldn't do that because Robert Zemeckis didn't want Back to the Future sequels, so that's like
That's
a whole
true.
other
That's
thing.
true.
But
That's a
yeah,
good
it's
point.
not like they could plan
Yeah.
like when they're gonna plan for a movie that didn't happen. But for me though, I don't know. I think on the surface, I do kind of like where they go with it. I think three has a really good conclusion to it, but in
Yeah.
two, it's like, I give or take with it. I don't know. I do think for like I don't know. It is kind of funny with like with the first one. You get to see a lot of different versions of these characters, and that's really fun. When they go to 2015, which is very funny now. We're 9 years after
Yeah,
2015,
where we
and
advance.
it's
There's
still the
flying
future.
cars.
It's super fun.
There's
Yeah,
like these there's
Jaws
cars.
3,
The Jaws
Jaws 19.
19.
Shark still looks fake.
Yeah,
It's fun,
that was a
but
funny joke. I like that. I like the
oh,
future design in
uh,
general. It looks really good.
yeah.
It's a cool
Yeah,
city.
I like that. Yeah, I
We
like
got
that. The whole thing is
automatic
that it's like
lacing
this.
shoes and stuff like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's I don't know. A lot of them, I think they were very hopeful. It's like 30 years we were not getting all that, but it did kind of be like, oh man, this is the future. All this stuff. It really fulfills the idea of the first one's about the past, and this was about like, okay, how do we go further? Oh, how about we go the opposite end, and we see how that goes. And it's very, very well done as well. I would say I love a lot of the gags and the the when like the future, the Jaws 19 thing we mentioned. I love that. I like that there's a detail where it says that it's directed by Max Spielberg, which is the real name of Spielberg's son. So it's like, oh, that's cool.
yeah. I
It's
also
a
like
little note there.
I also
Um,
like
the
just seeing old Biff in general and how like now that he's like
oh, he's so
no
funny.
longer
He's like the same, but he
working
acts like a
for
crotchety old man. It's
yeah, and I
hilarious.
like how
I
now
love the
that
whole
he's like
thing.
not working for the McFlys, he just like acts how he usually would act as an old man. Like the scene where he
And
talks to
it's funny
Marty,
'cause
he starts
he
like
just like
talking to him on that
embraces
headset.
being a crotchety old man. It's so funny.
It's pretty
And
funny.
then
I like it.
yeah, the whole thing is that they do the diner parallel where it's like there's the 50s diner and I was doing a similar thing in the future. It's like technology doesn't make sense, fucking robots that don't like act how they should. And like they do arcade games, but it's like they have like a retro 80s section, which is actually it actually fits because the movie predicted like the 80s nostalgia boom. How like at that time people would be like, remember the 80s? Which makes sense because the first movie is very nostalgic towards the 50s, so it all fits in together. But it's very on a point it's very funny the whole thing because like you have to use your hands and it implies that they fucking do video games without
Speaking of
even
which, I found
controls
out
now.
that one of those kids was Elijah Wood. I don't know if you knew
Oh
that.
yeah, I remember that. That's so weird.
That's like a
Fucking
weird thing
Elijah
to think
Wood
about.
grew up
That's
to be.
like an interesting detail.
Yeah.
And overall, this like film just has such a fun like story. So like Marty goes to the future, and so Marty go into the future. Like I'm unsure. Like, can you really go to the future and see your future self? Because if you leave your own like present timeline, wouldn't you just like leave existence or something like that?
This is a whole thing that
I don't know.
this is a whole thing that every like a sci-fi story I think has an inherent problem with because if you're going to the future, then it wonders what you were doing in your past. My whole stipulation with this one is like, and the thing is the character is gonna come back to a point
Yeah,
shortly
that's what
after, so
I
like
try
there's
to
not gonna
think
be that
about
gap.
in some way, but it's still like a
Yeah,
confusing little loop
yeah, that's the thing.
thing.
But also it's like it makes you wonder because you're not seeing the other characters' perspectives. Like, well, what are they doing while they're gone? What's that like little
Yeah,
timeline?
it's
Like
just
it's
kind of
gonna get removed, but
confusing,
still.
like compared to the first one. Like, yeah, that's I try to think like, oh, they're just gonna automatically like 100% come back, but like, I don't know. That's like this still doesn't really make much. I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to explain, but it's like it's just kind of
Yeah,
confusing.
I get what you mean. It's a
Yeah,
little weird, but
yeah, and then
mm,
there's like and then there's this. So basically, the conflict arises when old Biff goes back in time and like basically gives his younger high school self a book that predicts every single sports event till the beginning of the 2000s, and he basically uses
mhm.
it to bet all his money off of it, so he becomes rich, and then we see this like Biff topia type world, and I think it's like kind of an interesting main thing to have. I
Yeah.
think that
Mm. That's
works
one of
well.
them. It's one of the other stipulations I have a little bit with this movie. Not that happening. I think it's like it works well enough. But the whole thing I find weird is somehow Biff is able to sneak in and like get it and get it. It's kind of like I don't know. The whole thing's like really weird to me. He's like fucking snooping around the corner and no one notices. Especially considering he's like really old. You know, like
Yeah,
come on. But regardless, I do really like what they do with him.
yeah,
Because
and
what
how
was
we
I saying?
literally
The
went.
dystopian future looks so cool. Everything's fucking run down, like,
Yeah,
and you get to okay. A stipulation I do have, and I think it takes Marty a little too long to notice. Like he literally is in someone. He literally accidentally breaks into someone's house, and he's like, "What's going on? I don't get it." And like I do like that scene
that
though.
is
Where
a
he
funny
jumps.
scene with him
He's
being
going.
chased out of a
He's going
house.
into his old. Yeah. They have like a fucking like guns and shit. It's funny. I like the oh my I love how like when he goes to Strickland's house, he has like a gun and he's so fucking like pissed and it's cool because he's like normally you don't notice anything with him because he's like oh so stuck up and type he doesn't do anything but it is he's like he has a gun to Marty's head and it's like oh shit things are really like picking up now in terms of intensity and everything. I love that bit a lot. It's really cool. And then just oh my god, the Biff of this timeline is so like I love how much he just plays up his like comically like villainous
Yeah,
evil,
he's such a
and I think
funny
it fits Biff.
character to me.
And I think it fits Biff too because thing is, Biff in the 50s, the whole thing is he takes advantage of all the power he like has, like the small power he has so that he just has something as like simple as oh I have fuck what's it he like I'm just like have this power over George he fucking uses the shit out of that because he pushes George into everything he does all that I'm working at this company oh I'll boss around my like employees like George McFly he gets the whole thing pushes them
Yeah,
around and everything he uses all this little power and makes it so big so when he has all this like big grand scope he fucking owns it. He acts like this super villain thing. People like it's funny. People have compared Biff in this movie to Donald Trump, which I find kind of
that's
funny.
kind of
They're
funny.
both
Yeah,
they're both greedy businessmen and causes their own
yeah, that's
thing.
funny
But
to
I
think
love how
about.
just so cartoonish he is. It's implied he killed George,
Yeah,
which
he
is
killed
oh
George, and
shit.
he was gonna kill
Just
Marty too, or just force him to do
yeah.
suicide. So like,
Mm.
It's fucked up. Like he's such
Mhm,
an like a he's
mhm.
like a huge big villain here, and we also introduced to like his like grandkid named Griff, which I just find that funny that his grandkid is named
His
Griff.
name's so stupid. I love again. It shows the themes of history repeating because listen, two and three have these scenes where they very purposely repeat scenes from one and two, and you can call that lazy, but I think it's a clever way they show it because they're
Yeah,
not, well, not the same scenes. There are spins on them still, but also it's fun because it's like it really shows. Yeah, history is repeating itself, and Pussy like Marty's grandkid, Marty McFly Jr. He acts the same way that George does in the past, and it shows. Yeah, they're paralleling still, and it's really well done stuff in my book. I think it's all really
yeah. Also,
cleverly handled there.
one of the funniest jokes with in this movie
Mhm.
to me is the scene, you know, when Biff goes back to to 1955, which coincidentally has to be like is the exact same day when Marty originally went back in time in the first film. Now apparently there's like a deleted scene that kind of explains that coincidence and why Biff had that date in his mind, because I think like one of the guys at like the car dealership where Biff was getting like his car repair was like mentioning the date where he was like being an asshole to him or something like that. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so I guess it kind of like makes sense, even though that was a deleted scene. But like, I don't know. I guess
No, no.
they like
I
point
think
out
the
the
similar date
coincidence, so
thing,
it's not a
like,
big
I think that
deal.
that can be explained away because, like, November 12th becomes like a famous like historical date in like the Back to the Future universe. 'Cause that's like the clock tower thing. So he's probably thinking, oh, I'll go back to around then. So it all like it makes sense in my mind. I think as to why it would be that. But yeah, I just like the variety of Biff in this is so cool. You get like regular bully Biff and like the future with his grandson, and the past with that too. You get the whole spade of like emotions there, and also you get really tyrannical Billy Biff and then old Biff. Get all
Yeah,
of them.
yeah.
It's
Anyways,
very. I've seen like criticism of this movie where people are like, they're like, oh no, well Biff wouldn't be a villain. He was just like a generic bully before. But I explained the whole thing of how he like really likes to use his power. I consider that in character for him. I wouldn't say it's
I
too
feel
like
like this is
off
exactly what
course
Biff
or
would
anything.
have like done with
Mm.
all this money.
And I think Hmm. I think the fuck was it? The scene where Marty's telling he's like explaining to Biff like how do you get so rich or whatever, he's explaining the whole thing. The intensity of that scene is so good because Marty is trying to act coy about it, but clearly Biff's catching on to the whole thing. And then that whole like situation, it's
Yeah.
such a well written like scene. And then when he actually does notice, it's so like intense because no Biff has all this power and Marty's barely like scraping by to get him.
It's such a
It's
tension heavy scene.
so cool.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Marty's like, what happened to George? What happened to Dad? And then Lorraine's like, because he thinks Marty's like knocked out by the knock of that. Another scene where it parallels, by the way, because Marty wakes up in Biff's the same way he wakes up in Lorraine's old house in the 50s. But the whole thing is they Marty like he doesn't know, and then you get the reveal of George like rest in peace George McFly, and then the tombstone. It's like fuck, it's
Yeah.
so sad. It's
Yeah.
tragic, truly,
I
the
also want
whole
to
thing.
like mention back to the funny joke I was gonna say earlier. But one of the funniest scenes is when like young Biff interacts with his older self, and then and then he acts and then he says like the saying that he said in the first film, like he said, "How about you make out a tree and get out of here," or something like that. I forget the full thing. And then I like how old Biff points out how stupid he was and how he didn't even understand the phrase, and how he said it's actually make like a tree and leaf, and it just shows like how stupid old young Biff is compared to his older self, and I find
Yeah,
it
because
funny
his
that he's
whole
like,
like thing, his line that he says doesn't even like
it
make
doesn't even
sense.
make any
That they
sense.
even
That's like
using
always
that.
been a funny
Mm.
joke to me. The fact that they address that in
Yeah,
this movie is so funny.
yeah. A lot of the on the comedy side of things, a lot of my favorite jokes, well, from the future segment, but I think okay, future Marty is so sad, but it's kind of funny again in a pathetic sense. He's like gone
Yeah,
so far down. He's this fucking crotchety guy in like a chair, and he's able to like get he gets manipulated by like needles into like doing this thing, and then he gets fired from his company. It's like, oh man. well, you feel bad for him, and I was like, yeah, you see through his current attitude how it led to that situation, and it is kind of sad. I love the also this movie is credited as predicting FaceTime because they have the whole thing like they do like face video calls, like
Oh
whoa in the
yeah,
future.
that's
It
cool.
didn't really predict anything, but it's kind of cool. It's a neat parallel.
Yeah, another
But
thing another weird thing I wanted to mention, this is another like weird contrivance I think I noticed that always just made me feel weird. So basically, like one of the main reasons some parts of the plot even happen is it because they basically take Jennifer out of the car for some reason when Marty is trying to stop his younger self. But then I'm always like, why just keep her in the car while Marty does his thing? Like, why not just do that?
well,
Like part of me, I don't
that
know.
is true. I don't
Like,
know. I think the whole thing is that no, I think the whole thing they're trying to go for is that Doc realized that Jennifer, because she's like a teen and she's gonna be curious about the future. She's gonna want to snoop around and find some stuff. So she's like has to like knock her out to be like safe with that. I guess is to say,
I
but
mean, yeah, I understand why they knocked her out, but why would they keep her like in the car when she is not? Why would they keep her in the middle of the alley when she's knocked out instead of like putting her in the car?
yeah, that I'm not
I
entirely
don't
sure.
know.
I guess just
It's
to
not a
be like
huge deal, really. It's just like a weird thing. If I'm
no, well, I mean, I get why they have to do it because they have to have her out so like the future come and they can bring her and take her to her house, and that leads to
yeah, that's like the reason the
that whole
plot
scene.
happens, but like
Mm,
still, it's like
I do really like that part though. Jennifer's like snooping around the house, seeing how
yeah,
everything's
seeing like
like
Marty's
changing.
life and then like interacting
Mm.
with her old self and then they both pass
Oh, that
out.
scene's like so cool. This movie has this whole thing where it's really neat where they have like multiple versions of the same character on the screen at the same time, and it's like the
Yeah.
whole thing where they're like going across and like around and all that.
Yeah, Marty's kids
So
are
and
played
apparently
by
what they did,
Michael J.
yeah,
Fox
they're both
himself.
played by yeah, it's so cool. And I think what they did is they shot those scenes multiple times, but they like would overlay it so it'd be like the same thing each time, but with, like the multiple actors, and it's so the technique on it is so cool. I think you could obviously you can tell it's the same person, but regardless, it's just a really neat visual. I love that a lot. Um, oh, I love when old Jennifer meets young Jennifer, and they both like fucking pass out because like holy
Yeah,
shit,
that's a
they
funny
got
scene.
both knocked out. It's very funny, and there's like okay, this is one thing I want to bring up here because it relates to before. So there's a brief bit of Crispin, not Crispin, of George in this movie. The whole reason was he fundamentally disagreed with the message of the first movie, so he's like, I don't want to be
Yeah.
back for the sequels, which was his choice. He didn't want to like do that whole thing.
Hmm.
And I think it was like he was offered. I think they offered him a lot of money, but he refused regardless. He was like, yeah. I don't know if I want to do that again. But and there's a whole thing where he like threatened to sue because I think he was still credited for being George in this, even though it wasn't him. And there's a
Oh
whole
wow.
controversy around that, and that's led to Crispin Glover having a big fallout with Zemeckis, and that's why
Damn.
they've like apparently distanced themselves, which is kind of like it's kind of weird. It's the Back to the Future movies are easily Crispin's biggest role, and yet he's like entirely distanced from them completely.
Yeah.
Food for thought, I guess. I don't know, it's kind of weird. Now the only other big things in it are fucking Friday the 13th 4 and the
Mm.
Alice in Wonderland remake. Good God,
Yeah,
but
yeah, and then they like recast him and then so that way people don't notice. They like made like him go like
yeah,
upside down and this like a future
yeah,
mechanism thing as a way of like
yeah. Oh my God,
transportation so don't
yeah.
people don't notice that it's not
Yeah, no,
real.
it's clever how they do it. They get like they put a
Yeah,
bunch of
did a
and
good
plus
job
he's
of
old,
working
so he's gonna
around
look
it.
different anyway. So
Yeah.
even if it was a different actor, they could justify it because yeah, he's old, he's gonna look different.
Yeah.
This is a side note, but it shows how sad Crispin Glover's filmography after Back to the Future is. Something he's been the open season 2 and 3, and like
Oh.
Mike, what a fucking an epic movie, the fucking Friedberg and Seltzer thing. That's just sad.
Yeah.
Wow. But moving forward, um. Yeah, no, the guy got to replace him is good for like as little as he like needs to be, and it's still like fun, I'd say. So it's good for whatever like bit they have there. Like all the future stuff's cool. The we talked a bit about the alternate future, but I like all that. They bring Doc into it cleverly because they do all the where Doc's like he knows where Mario's gonna go because they think similarly and like approximately. It's not in another movie it'd be convenient, like the way they all set it up the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the whole thing they do after that is really cool, where they're explaining whole Doc's whole like his whole like thought process. And I love the scene of the chalkboard where he's like explaining how the whole thing like works with the alternate
Yeah, with
timeline and all that.
alternate
And they just show the
timelines.
newspaper where it shows that apparently in this timeline Doc Brown is locked up in a mental asylum because of Biff, and it's like wow,
Yeah.
that's
It's like,
fucking
damn, like
and
the
they
stakes
set it
are
up really
high
well
in
because they
this
have all
one.
these like, yeah, yeah. Oh, and they do that really well because they set up all these stuff things are holding. So when Marty finally fixes the future when he burns the almanac, he they have that scene where the newspaper it's George initially this, and then it fades into the other one. It's really clever. I like the whole for a movie like that technically relies on convenience, it has a lot of good setups and payoffs. That's all really well done. And we've talked about the alternate present, talked about the future. That all stuff kicks ass. I love all that.
Yeah.
The past is really cool. I love that because it's just you see the first movie, but from this alternate perspective, and I think it's really cool because it's like you're seeing scenes you've seen before, but not in like a "duh, remember that" way. It's like you get it from a new angle, and it's just
Yeah,
fun
new
seeing how they have to avoid
yeah.
their other selves and do this thing while they're doing the other stuff. Oh, it's
It's like an
so
interesting
well set up.
perspective to see it too, and it like
Mhm,
leads to like such high tensions in a
mhm,
lot of ways. Like with like you got to make sure
mhm.
Marty doesn't disturb his other self, or else the timeline may be effective. You got to make sure that you got to make sure he gets the book back from Biff, and make sure that Biff doesn't go and fight him. And it's like the stakes are high here, and like you really feel them. You know. I also like the scene where another funny joke is the scene where Marty wants to steal the book from Biff while he's like knocked out by George, and then he briefly wakes up, so he just punches him again to get him to pass out, and takes the book. And one of the guys
Yeah.
thinks that he stole his wallet, Biff's wallet, which I
Oh
thought
yeah,
was funny.
literally. I think he stole that guy's wallet. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
Um, okay. This leads to another criticism I have. I think it's fun, but this part that really fucking annoys me, where like Biff's driving his car and he's using the Marty's using the walkie-talkie to talk with Doc. Which, by the way, I like. There's a bit I like there where he just has all this currency of all these different points in
Yeah,
time, where
that's a
it's like,
nice, funny
well, yeah,
joke.
that makes sense because Doc's like this fucking like historical maniac. Of course, he has all these different currency from these different points. He's a collector of all that.
Yeah,
But point is, he I don't like the bit where like they're talking in these walkie talkies, and Marty isn't even whispering that much. Yet Biff just still can't hear him. Sure, there's a radio, but like regardless, it's like, come on. I get that they're on like traffic, so maybe like I don't know cars and stuff, but regardless, it's still like annoying. But I do like that scene a lot where he realizes it and creates this like cool like chase, and then he gets hit to the menorah again. It's another new peril, another thing. It's about how time repeats itself, and they have a parallel there. It's really really cool. I
yeah,
love all that a lot. And oh my god, it's so cool. I love when they're doing the fucking the Johnny Be Good scene, but Marty has to like go around and like figure it out. And then Biff's like cronies, his goons, he thinks that's he thinks that that's the Marty who's playing. So it's like multiple things are intersect. No, and the multiple things are happening at once, and the goons are about to attack the Marty that's playing, which would fuck everything up because he still needs to get back to the future. It's like
yeah,
so much is going on, yet you see all these different perspectives, and like
yeah.
it's
It's like
still the same scene, but from this, it's so cool. I love it so much. It's
yeah, it's like
such a good
it's
scene.
such
I
a
love all
it's
of it.
so cool if I'm being honest. It's such a these movies are just so cool with like their time travel shenanigans, and this film just has like such a fun situation with like someone else using the time machine for like for their own selfish reasons, and then him like completely destroying the timeline, and it's like, ooh, wow, it's like it's very interesting and cool. I like it. It's epic. Frankly, I like
Mhm.
it. It's just a fun movie, and like I said, the future thing is cool, and also they predicted like apparently Back to the Future too like predicted the Cubs winning the World Series, and like that's like a funny prediction, like how they actually
Yeah.
is the creators literally said that they didn't even really like thought any of this would happen in 2015, so they like just
Well, yeah,
went
because it makes
wild
for a
with
fun
it.
movie. But, it is funny. One of them coincidentally lined up. I Yeah, I do wonder if there's an actual like sports almanac similar to the one in like the movie that they based it off of, like historical events from here to there. Like they could probably make that to
Yeah,
be
they
like
could.
similar. But yeah, I love the scene. The first scene of it is really cool. I like the radio bit where old man Biff is just desperately trying to get Biff to pay attention, but he is not fucking having it. He's like, but then he listens like, oh, and it's the whole thing. It's very well structured. The whole thing. Great like payoff there. I also love the climax where Marty's like sneaking around. He's trying to get the book,
Oh,
and then
the
he finds
entire
the wrong
section
one
just
because
like
Strickland confiscated it. So then Marty has
yeah.
to go over, but it's the wrong one. And it's such a good
I
scene
also like
where
the
it's
in
all
general.
like,
I also like this scene with
mm,
Mr. Strickland, who ends up like getting like shot by a bunch of like kids who were just like storming and shooting his house. It's a good way of establishing this like new future difference of how messed up it is now, you know. And it's like
mm,
it's cool, just pretty cool, you know.
mm.
I like it. It's a great
Yeah.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I do okay. Another thing I do know is so the whole thing in the movie I kind of notice is like a convenience. But like I think it kind of works too, because let me explain. So the whole thing is Marty gets Doc's like we did it, Marty, and then the DeLorean gets struck by lightning again and it goes boom. And I think in another movie that might be like, oh, that's convenient. I can't believe that happened at this particular time. But also it does because in pre-established Back to the Future history, we know that November 12th, 1955 is the day that the lightning strikes and goes zoom, and it like
Yeah.
does that. And that's like what was I gonna say? There's that the band, the lightning, and then it goes there. And also it makes sense because why Doc you might think, oh well Doc knows that, I couldn't even think of it. Well clearly there's like a lot on the character's mind because after this whole other series of events happens, and then like this, so it's like yeah, Doc's not gonna be thinking about that, and then boom, that sends him back, and that creates a whole thing. And for being a convenience, I think plot wise it's structured well, and that's the thing I can say for a lot of these movies. They have these things that I'd be like another movie I wouldn't criticize, but the structure and the way it all goes down and the way it all is put together is very well done. And I love it a
Yes.
lot. And the ending of this is so good too. When the guy comes up, he's like, well, "For Marty McFly," and then he's like, "The Doc's alive. He's in the old West, but he's alive." And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like, well, for
speaking of
fun, it's
which, I
funny.
think this movie also does a
Mhm.
good job at
Yeah.
setting up events in the third film, solely because there's like
Oh
multiple
yeah, yeah.
lines in this one, like how Doc like establishes how he might want to see like the Old West at some point, how he might want to study woman, which is like a detail that's kind of a part of the third film. Uh, and like they also establish Biff's ancestor, Mad Dog, who's the main antagonist of the third film, which I thought was really cool. Like when there's like a slideshow showing like the Biff family history thing when it's like when the future changes. I thought that was a really cool detail. So yeah, that's cool.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, also another thing, I really love the end of this movie where it's like it's the clock tower scene from the first one, and that's like obviously a classic scene.
Yeah.
But then Doc sees Marty and he just
Oh, I
fucking
love that
passes out. He's like,
moment.
"What? You can't be here!" And then the movie ends. And then if you're watching this in theaters, Amazon Prime still leaves this in, but they put a teaser for Back to the Future 3, which kind of where the movie ends with a trailer for the other one. From memory, I think what I heard is the Lord of the Rings movies did that too, where Fellowship ended with a Two Towers teaser and Two Towers did for Return of the King, which would be kind of cool actually, since those movies would look great on the big screen. But I think it's cool. It's like the whole thing. And
Yeah. It's
I say,
it's pretty cool, yeah.
mm,
And yeah, I feel like
mm,
what's like now that they like now that I feel like they were aware that they were gonna make a third film to end this trilogy,
mm,
they tried to like lead up to the third film more. That's kind of like
mm,
explains why the third film like fully continues Marty's arc, and
mm.
while the second film like foreshadows it more, you know, but still like flows well as a trilogy, I'd say mostly. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
Another thing that I kind of want to mention, I was going to mention this earlier, but another like small time travel thing that like confuses me. So let's say, so Biff changed the past, okay? So that means Marty
yeah.
basically has
Mm-hmm.
an entirely new life, yet his memories, I guess, don't reflect that. It's kind of like back to the thing in the first film, but I feel like in the second one it's just more confusing here because of how like substantial, like, because the timeline is just completely different now because George McFly is dead now and stuff like that. And it's just like the whole memory thing is just like kind of confusing to me, I guess. So like if Biff
Mhm.
completely changed like the past, where now Marty just doesn't, I guess, remember any of it. Though I do bet his reaction to finding out that Biff is his stepdad is pretty funny. Like that's a funny moment. I like that.
Yeah. The whole thing is so good. The back and forth there is cool too because again that's another parallel. They see, Biff and Lorraine. They have this whole like thing where Lorraine's like, "Get your hands off me, Biff," and like in the 50s, it's like, "Oh, that's funny." And Biff's just a silly little guy, and he's being a little bit of a sexual harasser, I guess. But it's like, ah, silly Biff. But now it's in the 80s, and it's like, oh, yeah, he did
Oh
not learn
no.
anything, and it's even worse now. Oh man, it's even have to like force her to marry him. It's so sad and
He's
shit.
kind
It's
of
like,
messed up.
man,
Biff is a messed up man, but he is a pretty funny character. Also, in terms of another
yeah.
cool time travel detail, even though this film like gives me, like I mentioned before, this film still gives me like two other like time travel questions that make less sense to me. I still think that one of the fun details is that I noticed that Biff, older Biff, is in pain as Morty and Doc take off into the DeLorean. That like shows that he's like slowly fading from existence because of the timeline switch.
Mhm.
So like there's still some cool details like that. I just think this film doesn't like
Mhm.
expertly use it as well. Solely because this time they're going to the future and that just opens up more questions. Still, I've seen movies use time travel worse. So yeah, it still like
Yeah, you
leads
could be
to
like
like a fun
no
adventure
Looper
at the end of the
or
day, so I can
something.
somewhat let
The
it
other thing,
pass.
even if the time travel didn't make a lot of sense, which I think for the most part it still functions well.
Yeah, it functions decently well,
Regardless,
yeah.
I think even if it didn't, which we'll say hypothetically, I would still enjoy this movie a lot because
Same.
frankly, they use it for very fun concepts. They get the future is it's mainly gag heavy, but they get what they need to out of it and to make it go to the rest. The
Yeah.
past is similarly, they get like what they need to out of like the fucked up like dystopian era. So you get a great visual, then you do it again. And the past is still fun because the 50s stuff they get I love I like how Marty and Doc had to disguise themselves, so they wear these fucking goofy looking like black suits and everything. It looks funny.
Yeah, it's
And then
funny.
oh my god, I forgot to mention I love that scene where you see the original Doc from the 50s. He's setting up like the clock tower thing, and
Yeah, and Doc's
then
gotta
the other
like
Doc runs into him, and he has to do it without him realizing it's him. It's so like
yeah, another
inconspicuous. It's
like
very funny.
great tension heavy scene. I like that. I like that. There's
Yeah.
a lot of cool stuff. It's a very fun movie. I still enjoy the characters, Doc and Marty. They're just like a fun duo. They're like one of the most iconic duos in history for a reason, and they play off each other well in this one. So yeah, it
Mhm.
works. This is still a really fun movie, and I definitely like. It's a good sequel. Has some cool time travel concepts, and while it doesn't work as well as the first film, which might be like a somewhat of an unfair comparison, because I think that film's story just flows
Mhm.
so well, and I definitely prefer the first
Yeah,
film, but
yeah.
it's still like the sequel is still a great continuation, and I
Well, that's
think
the
they
thing. The,
still
the
like.
first movie's like I think perfectly structured from top to bottom. So I'm not like
Yeah,
offended that these movies don't live up. It just kind of they're not as good, and I think that's okay because I still love these movies. Like love them top to bottom, all three. And yeah, I don't know. Two, like there are little holes. I think that arc isn't as like well done as it could be. But and at the end of the day, I do really like how they concluded in three. So it's not even like I hold too much like against it. It's like it's a okay with
yeah,
me.
it's a
And
great movie. If you,
yeah,
I don't think I have much else to say
yeah.
about this one, but uh, it's a great
Um,
movie.
no, I don't. I think we're mostly well good. A lot of the stuff I would say, like I mentioned previously, they recast Jennifer in this, but I think is like
Yeah,
I don't know, she does more in it, so I guess that's like kind of why you need to have more of a detailed like impression of her. And I don't know. The rest is just it's it's all right.
yeah. I guess
Usual
one like
usual.
interesting detail that I noticed was that Like
Mhm.
apparently the climax in this movie was originally supposed to take place in 1960, only for it to be like changed, and there was going to be like a, I think like a different variation. I kind of forgot what exactly it was, but I just knew it was like originally the climax of this movie was not going to take place in
Oh.
1955, which would have been interesting. But I
I
kind of
like it
think,
being in the 1950s because one, I think it's a cool like thing to see different perspectives, but also I
yeah,
think it creates a good hook where you have your present, you have your past, you have your future, and those are the three we go between, and it's great. 'Cause I think if they had a 60s, it would be make it more complicated. It's like we got 50, 80s, then the 50s, but then 80s, then 2010s, and then back to the I think it simplifies it more doing it like this, and it's all very very well put together, I would say. So. Yeah.
yeah.
Da-da-dum.
I'm gonna give this a
Mhm.
solid 8 out of 10. It's a great movie. Highly recommend it. Uh,
Mhm. I would go, I think I would go low 9, high 8 because I love a lot about. There are flaws, but it's just so fun. All these movies,
yeah, this
the,
is a
the just the
blast to
chemistry
watch.
and the actors and all like premises, it's all just really well done. But yeah, Back to the Future 3 is better though, and we'll get into that right now.
Yeah,
Um, Back
yeah.
to
Let's get into it.
So Back to the Future 3 takes place immediately right where 2 left off, which by the way, that's the one thing I love about these movies. Each of them
Takes
ends
place and
and begins
and
where the last one
begins.
is. And it's so
Yeah,
cool. If
they all like feel
theoretically, if you wanted
connected.
to, you could yeah. Theoretically, if you wanted to, you could make like a fan cut that just this is one 6-hour movie. And it'd be weirdly structured, but you could do that. I think that'd be cool. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyways,
Back to the Future Part 3. So now the whole thing is following
we're
up
in
the
the
last
old
one.
west.
Which was a joke. Yeah, which, by the way, I forgot to mention this, but I find that end scene is kind of embarrassing because I think of something dark side because they do that joke at the end where
Oh
Chris
yeah,
just reads it. It's so stupid. But no, the whole thing is so basically now they're like, oh, Doc, he's alive. He's in the old west, but he's alive. That's the whole thing. So then
yeah.
Marty, with the help of 1955 Doc, he has to go back in time to in order to save him.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, he Marty realizes, oh shit, visiting the cemetery, Doc Brown died
Died. Uh
in a couple
oh.
days in the 1800s. Like, fuck. But regardless, he's going to do it. He comes in with a new name, Clint Eastwood, which
Which is based
I
off
like
of
the whole thing. They just call him the famous Western actor, Dollar Trilogy a lot from the time. So then
yeah.
Marty and the gang, Marty goes back in time to the 1800s, finds 1800s Hill Valley, meets Doc, and eventually gets him roped up into another strange situation, strange set of circumstances, strange set of circumstances. And yeah, it's
It's a good movie. I like it.
look, well, maybe a little better than good, but I don't
Okay,
know.
I
So we have conflicting
enjoy
opinions
this
on this. You're
film.
okay. Mm,
I'm gonna talk about my
this is where our
perspective since
differences come in.
I know we have a little. I really like this
Mm,
movie. I think it's a really good movie, but I don't know. I just
well,
don't love it. Like I definitely enjoy it.
uh,
I don't think there's like even that
uh,
much like wrong with this film that makes me like that. I don't know. Like subjectively, I just don't enjoy it as much. There's definitely a lot I appreciate about it, and it does get better the more I think about it. So I might even raise my rating, but I don't know. I just like I know
um,
some people, a
but
lot of people continue see this as the weakest one, and I think I might, and I feel like I know you disagree, but I think I might have to agree with
I
this one.
disagree. See, thing is, I love 2 and 3, so I can't even be mad. Like you go either way, and it's fair. But I think ultimately 3. Well, first of all, I love it because of how it concludes things. I think
Yeah,
it's a really
yeah,
nice
especially it's
conclusion,
a great
and
conclusion.
it does certain things that the other movies don't do, and I think it's in a really nice way. But we'll get into that. My whole thing is, first of all, I think Doc in this movie is really nice. They give him a nice
Yeah, they give him a good
Give him a
arc
nice
here.
arc
I enjoyed
where,
his arc.
where he wants to fuck the mom from Elf.
But oh
It's
my
neat,
god, yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I like
If you didn't know if that's
the
the same person, but
yeah. I
I
actually
think
didn't
what
know this.
I like that's the main thing I do like about that is I think it's a neat way to go for because Doc's whole thing throughout these movies, as I explained how they very cleverly set up. He's a man of science. That's his whole thing. He's like the future is now thanks to science. That's his whole thing. So he's like Marty, I can't deal with your riz, Marty. You can't. The point is, he's like, nah, that's
We got
not
a
the type of shit
role
he gets into.
reversal here, which I like.
Mm.
We got
Yeah. So Marty's the one
Marty's the
focused on
voice of
getting like
reason,
back.
and
Yeah.
um,
Meanwhile, yeah, they actually reflect this in one part that I really like, where Marty and Doc say they're each other's catchphrases. Doc's Twitter says that this is
oh my
getting
God,
heavy,
yeah, I
and
remember. Yeah, this is heavy, and he said great. It's a great moment. I love that part.
yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me of
Hmm.
it. Yeah, yeah, it's a fun movie. I really like the characters just have a great dynamic. I really like the moment where Doc and Marty just like first reunite. I also like I said, I like the joke where 1950s Doc ends up like seeing Marty again, and at first he just refuses to believe that he's there, and like I think it's a really funny moment between them. I like that part, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think
Um.
it's like I don't know. I feel like the way to describe it, I just don't like love this movie. I guess it's just like I love the climax. I like there's definitely heart here, and it's overall a really solid
Oh, it's
conclusion.
so.
I really like the ending too, with like which
Oh, the
I'll talk
ending
more
is
about soon.
so good.
Yeah, that's why it would piss me off
Hmm.
if they made
I
a fourth one because the ending in this movie is so
Yeah,
good.
no, because I think the whole thing connects everything really well to like the themes of the movie. Like the whole theme of the trilogy is the future is what you make of it. You can do whatever you want if you put your
Exactly.
mind to it, and it's a very optimistic message. But I think it's done very well, where it's like
Hmm.
nothing's written. The whole movie, for a movie about like time travel and seeing the future, nothing is written yet until like you show how you like act differently. Because Marty, his life could have gone a horrible direction. He could have gone into a car crash after racing with needles, and he would have become a depressed, sad sack for the rest of his life. But
Exactly.
that was not written yet. It was written the way he was acting now, but he can change it, and he
Yeah.
does at the end of this movie. And he learned. And Doc, his whole life was a man of science, but eventually he learned he can become. He's a nice family at the end. He gets the best of both worlds, and he has
Yeah,
a
it's a
nice
good
like
ending
thing
for
to.
both of these characters that I
It's
think
such
works
a
well.
it's a very like sweet end, and I very much appreciate it. The whole thing where he's talking with Marty and Jennifer and everything, and then the train comes and it ends it. It's a really satisfying end to these movies because I think Zemeckis didn't want to make more, and I think he knew, all right, we're gonna conclude with this one, and it'll be like a nice capper. And it's all done very, very nicely. I love the ending to this movie a lot. It makes me really happy. The whole way they
Yeah, and
concluded it
like
all. It's very nice and conclusive. The whole thing.
anyway,
The
yeah.
Yeah.
So, how about
That's
this
not even to
movie?
talk about the rest of the movie. It's we were talking about the ending before everything else.
Yeah, that's
But
yeah, but
yeah,
the ending is easily
yeah.
like one of my favorite parts of it. But in terms
Oh,
of like
definitely for me
a
it is.
whole
But I think the
package,
rest is still fun too. We got a lot of
it's
like.
fun. I just like I don't know. I feel like a lot of people who don't like love this movie and think it's the weakest might say like they're just not as into like the Western setting compared to the fun time travel
Yeah.
shenanigans of the first two.
Um.
And I think I'm like
I think
bordering
people are kind of
towards that
unfair against this
side
movie. I don't
for
know.
me
I
a
think
little
some
bit.
people are like, this movie barely has any time travel. But I'm
I
like,
mean,
dude,
that doesn't mean it's
one, it
like
barely has any
not a
time
good
travel
movie or
either.
anything. It's
And
definitely
it's
a good
like,
movie.
no, yeah. Like one doesn't have time travel either, and that movie fucking kicks ass, as we just talked about. And I think I think they kind of needed this because one goes back to this like more simplicity that the other ones didn't, where it's like, okay, um, what is it? Because two has all the jumping around, like we're up and down and all around, but three's like, okay, we got 55 back to the past, then we go back to our present time, and that's all. And it's kind of like one in a similar way where they're like, all right, we need to do this specific thing in a specific time to get the energy to be able to time travel. And it's all, I don't know, it's all very, very, very neatly done. This is a side, but this is a detail I really like about this movie. Where for some reason other time travel movies seem to see time traveling like it's like a thing where you can like also teleport yourself to different like points where like you can time travel and they're also in a completely different location when they time travel, when it's like, no, in this movie it's wherever they time travel, it's that same exact spot but just decades earlier. It's all
Yeah,
Hill
that's
Valley, and I
cool.
appreciate that. Because I know other
That's just
if you notice that in other time travel movies they do that, and I don't get it, because like you're time traveling but you're not like a car, you don't move anywhere. Like that, that's a deep. If you notice that, you pick it up in time travel media. It's weird, but I like that they go back to the simplicity here, and it has this like the themes of repetition are done really well in this one because it's like, it's so funny because like even decades. and decades earlier, it's still the same shit. Like there's still an Abiff equivalent, there's still a Strickland equivalent, there's still a bar that's similar, they still has same groups of people. Literally decades earlier, it's still the same shit as the 50s and the
Yeah, like
80s,
the
and that's very
antagonist of
funny to
this
me how
movie
they
is
could
like
parallel
Buford,
it.
aka Mad Dog
Be-
Tannen, which is
yeah, yeah,
basically
Buford Mad Dog Tannen.
Biff's
Mhm.
ancestor, and I find that kind of funny. Like, I think that's like
Oh, it's
a
so
funny
fun.
thing seeing the side of like the Biff family, like how he's this like just this huge asshole, with like just being
Oh
this
yeah.
old ass cowboy, like this old mean cowboy guy. I think it's pretty funny that way. I mean, like, I feel like in
Mhm.
terms of describing it, I don't have too many actual issues with it. I just feel like most of like the middle of this movie, while I think there's a lot of great moments, I'm just like not loving this movie's story as much. I feel like the second one, like, I just think I enjoy like the story a bit more in that one compared to this one. And it's like I don't
Mhm.
know, like the characters are still great. I enjoy Doc's arc. I enjoy Marty's arc payoff, even though I kind of agree with you in terms of like it being a bit suddenly set up in the second film. I still think it's done to like great conclusion when he refuses to stand up to Mad Dog. And I also find it funny Mad Dog's
Mhm.
like reaction to him like trying to quit the fight in terms of like yeah, and then Marty just trying to fight off the urge of not being offended when someone calls him chicken, and it's like it leads to a great ending. I just like do you understand what I'm saying? Kind of,
Mhm.
like I
Yeah, no,
just
I kind of get what you're saying. I don't know. I really, I just like I get why people wouldn't be as into like the setting and everything, but I don't know. For me, I just still think it's like fun. Again, when they do scenes that parallel, I think it's really cool when they do. There's some more chase in this one, but I think the Old West gives an extra like flavor to it. The bar scene's kind of similar, but it's the Old West again. It adds a little
yeah,
bit
the
to it.
set is well
And I like
done.
the whole thing
Definitely
in.
say that.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think what they do with it is like interesting because they tie it into similar scenes repeating ties into like Marty's like arc again because if he just like back down he'd be fine but he's like he has to like be the bigger man and be like fuck you Mad Dog and then that's what causes the duel that ends up like leading to when the tombstone changes that's like oh shit that's his potential death.
What? Oh,
That's like
that's no good.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. It's I like but I like the fading into the visual, the tombstone fading from like him to Clint Eastwood. It's funny,
yeah.
and then it eventually fades to nothing when Evil Dead Rise of them are dying. It's cool. I like all
I
that.
also
And
like I I
sorry, yeah, go on.
also think like it's cool, like how we mentioned in the first film, the image of like Doc and Marty, like the whole like clock tower thing, and it's like cool seeing Doc and Marty take a picture with like the original clock tower, which has had such like a
Yeah,
large
yeah.
effect on this movie, like on this franchise. It's like a key element to the time travel stuff. And it's even
Mhm.
mentioned in the second film, I guess, still seen as a historical landmark, but it's a cool seeing them take a picture of it. I thought that was a nice little detail. So
Mhm.
yeah, and
Uh,
I also think the romance
mm.
between Doc and Clara, I think that was like that felt genuine. Like
Yeah,
it was
it's
nice seeing
sweet.
like Doc get more development in that way. Kind of see him like see this different side of him. Like we even see him depressed at a bar at the end. The climax with the train is really
Yeah.
fun in terms of trying to get the car back
Oh, I
into.
love the train, like the whole thing. I love that a lot. The whole like visual of like the train again. Rather than a similar thing with the first movie, they need like a thing to send them back to that time. But it still works really well. I love the whole like thing they got going there. Main thing. Fuck, what was I gonna say? Um, Another thing I really like about because like that central like romance like it does do a good contrast like because Doc's the one as he mentioned he's the guy who's always into like the science stuff and then he gets to see for a more emotional lens and he finally gets like a take a step back and he's like it's neat because he has these two sides of him clashing where like objectively he's like nah logically that doesn't make sense this person's from like an entirely different time period I can't go through with that no but also he has to see what his heart's telling him and it's like he sees both sides of him like clash in this movie and it's well done stuff. I like the whole thing a lot. I prefer him to Marty's art because again I think it's still like kind of weirdly done compared to how it's done. Like it's just how it comes out of nowhere. But we talked about that with two.
Yeah.
With three, I still do like Marty's bit because okay, one thing that's like as related, but I find it weird how they we see Marty's like great grandparents or something. Yet and one of them looks like Marty, and then one of them looks like his mom. Which, considering the incest context of the first movie, I've
Oh
always found
yeah,
a little weird. Like
that's
yeah, it's
kind
like
of yeah, that's like
it's
an
not like
interesting
technically anything, but
detail.
it's always been something that kind of looks weird to me.
Yeah, they
Like
probably would
oh
have gotten like
weird.
Jordan instead if
Mhm.
Crispin Glover was still a part of these movies in some way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that, but that's definitely why because they couldn't get Crispin. I assume they would if he wasn't there. But Michael J. Fox still does good in his like bigger role. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Like,
like
mhm.
another great detail I like is that the character of Mr. Strickland is also ancestor is displayed in this movie, and how he's like always his family has always been about discipline, so we get to see how he's like how he became such a strict principal in the first place in terms of always like taunting Marty in a lot of ways, you know. He's a fun character, and
Yeah.
it was a funny little detail as well. I think there was a deleted
It's just
scene.
funny that like yeah. It's
There's
just
a
funny that his sternness over time is passed down for like generations because he's like it makes
yeah.
sense. He goes from like there to there, and it all like adds up
Yeah, another
really.
thing I'm gonna mention,
But
there's like a deleted scene in this movie where like I'm pretty sure Buford like pretty much kills the Mr. Strickland ancestor. I forgot his specific name, but like yeah, rest in
ah
peace. Uh, I mean, I
ah
don't think he's actually no, he's not
tragic
actually dead in the movie, but he was going to die at some point. So never mind about the rest in peace thing
shame.
because he's not actually dead.
Well, I'd say
Just a fun
yeah.
thing I thought
Uh
worth pointing out.
Yeah, there are a lot of like compared to see. I think the reason this one isn't talked about as in the same way as two is, I think if you see someone ask what their favorite Back to the Future sequel is, I often hear two and not three. I think the reason for that is because two is a very bombastic movie. There's a lot going on, a lot of different like bits as we did, but that movie's all around. Whereas three, in contrast, is very simple and comparatively, it's not
Yeah,
as much going on. And I get what and I think that's all. I think that's kind of why I prefer three because I don't know. I like the simplicity of it a lot more, and again, just as a conclusion, it works like really well. It has a lot of like individual scenes. I really like. One of my favorites is that part where Marty and Needles, yeah, they were like about to go on like their chase, and that's like from what Jennifer knows. That's oh shit, that's when Marty's gonna like fuck up again, and he's gonna the whole life's gonna change. But then because Marty knows he can't do that, he just lets them like go off instead of like being a dumbass about it again. And it's a really good scene because you get it's simple, but it shows his way of growth very easily. He's like, I'm not gonna let fucking idiots like them not like dictate what I have to do because of his like own ego, I guess. He's like, I don't want to be called a chicken, guys. You can't let that happen. But
yeah.
yeah, it's just all super fun, super
Yeah, and I
clever,
think it's a
super creative.
perfect
I
ending for
love
this
the
trilogy,
movie.
and it's a good
Yeah,
movie.
perfect ending.
I just don't like
Mm,
enjoy it like from a subjective standpoint as much as the second film. And in general, I just find it
mm.
like I don't know.
Tisk,
I just
tisk.
think it's good. I enjoy myself while watching it. There's a lot I can appreciate about it. It's a great ending to the trilogy, and yeah, yeah,
It
just
was in
enjoy
a
it.
million die in the West.
Oh god. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry. We're gonna talk about the fourth Back to the Future film after this, A Million Ways to Die in the West. Yeah,
Does that okay? That joke doesn't even make.
that
I
joke is
kind of
so
find that funny. Just
stupid.
imagining, just imagining in the background of this movie a Seth MacFarlane comedy is happening. Like that
It
doesn't even
doesn't
make
make
sense. But
any
if you think about it like
sense.
that,
It
it's
doesn't
funny.
make any fucking sense though, because
Joke is so
if you've
stupid,
seen A
but I
Million
don't know.
Ways to Die in the West,
It's
it
kind of.
makes no sense how this film could occur. It's such a
Mhm.
stupid joke. Get it? Because Back to the Future 3 took place in a western. Get it? It was like at the same time period,
So, yeah,
even though it
it's such
doesn't
a
make it's such
yeah.
a
It doesn't
stupid
even make
joke.
sense.
It's like it's kind of I
Plus,
sometimes
like,
laugh at it because I find it
mm,
just like such a stupid reference to make in this type of movie. Like they even got
mm.
the actual Christopher Lloyd in it because of course they did. They got him to like
Yeah.
reprise
What
his role
what
for such
Christopher
one
Lloyd isn't in
stupid
much. I'm
joke.
sure he jumped on the opportunity to be in a Seth MacFarlane production.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, I can be in a movie
Yeah.
again.
I almost forgot
Be
to
Doc
mention
Brown.
the A Million Ways to Die in the West reference, but we had to mention it,
Hmm.
especially since we did an entire
Oh,
episode on Seth
of
MacFarlane's
course.
filmography. So
Truly,
yeah,
truly.
we had to mention it. So like,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I don't think I have as much to say about it. I guess I'll be a fucking nerd and point out another small like plot confusing thing that's similar to the one I pointed out in the first film, but I'll mention it. So it's a bit of a
Mhm.
plot beat in this movie that when that basically it's kind of a cool detail, but basically Clara was originally supposed to die off a cliff, and the place was originally supposed to be named like I think like Clayton Hill or something like that. I don't know. It was supposed to be named after her basically when she died. But since they saved
Mhm.
her, basically it is shown that uh they prevented it. They prevented this canon event. So basically when they did that Marty like points it out, and like this isn't a huge deal. It's not a huge deal at all if I'm being honest, but like but like how does Marty know that? Like wouldn't that erase from his brain or something? Wouldn't that
I don't know.
change?
I think the whole thing is, again, like I said with the first movie, the whole idea in my head is like
Mm,
the things still happen, but then after that it creates like a
I
split
I
where it
guess
goes like
so.
loops around. I don't know. I don't
Uh,
know. That's my own personal head canon for it, but there's like you can
I
interpret it in like a
yeah, I
number of
guess
ways.
so. Like it's not a
That
huge deal. I
that's the
think you
way
could
I like
also make a
internally
case for it.
justify it in my head. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and maybe it like
but
slowly fades from his mind or something, like the picture thing or whatever. Who knows? But that's just a
maybe,
theory.
maybe
That's just a theory. There's like
a
interpretations you could do
game
with some of this
theory.
stuff. Or film theory since we're talking about film,
Yeah.
but
Da-da-da.
who cares? Um
Yep.
yeah, I feel like this is the one I have the least to say about if I'm being honest, because
I would agree honestly because two and one have like a lot. This one I think is I still really like it, but I don't know, just comparatively, it's not like
yeah.
it's not as like it doesn't have as much. But I get it. It's just fun. I
Yeah,
don't
and I
fucking
feel
know.
like Doc and
Like
Marty's friendship is really shown here, Like I said, the scene where they reunite
yeah, I
really
think their
shows that
arcs
they're
like
friends.
contrast pretty well because like they're both like they both kind of have like the opposite lesson, but they need to learn that there's a balance. Because Marty can't let his like insecure emotions take over and be like, nah, fuck you, bitch. And then that like because the him getting in over his head leads to all. That's the whole reason the conflict of this movie even happens with the fucking like duel and everything, which is a great scene by the way. I love the duel where Marty just comes up and he's like so confident, and then eventually like because of all he's learned, Mad Dog gets fucked over again. It's fun. It's a fun scene.
Yeah,
Um, and mm, yeah, and then Doc learns the opposite. He, like something that's not all about like objectivity, and you got to embrace your emotions a little more. And they both come to a middle ground about the future and whatnot. And if the future is always bright, as like the movie says, nothing's written, and you can learn from it all. And I think it's a very great message these movies teach. And I don't know, these movies have all meant a lot to me because I love one and the sequels. They all fit in so well together as like a trilogy. I know some aren't as huge on them, but for me, I like love
this is a
all three of them.
perfectly
And
solid
they
trilogy.
yeah, and, like no like I don't think there's a like a black sheep in any of them. They're all really fun movies, and I think
For
they
me,
all
I
come
do
together
think,
very
for me
well.
personally, I think they get worse as they go along, but that doesn't, or weaker, because that worse implies that they're bad, which they're definitely not bad movies. So I just think they get weaker as
Uh,
they go along, but I still think they're all solid movies. I would definitely rewatch them given
yeah,
it. I think they all have a very well flowing time travel story. The music and overall score is great in all of them. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but it is still shown really well in this movie and the second film.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it has a lot of, in general, the technical aspects and performances. All these movies, they all work really well. I think I have the most passionate feelings on the first film, and least passionate about the third one. And the second one, it's in the middle of it all. But I still think they're all
Yeah, no,
great,
I get that.
good movies. They're all good
Oh no, for me,
movies.
I don't think two or three is that much better than the other. Okay, I prefer three, but two is also very solid. So like all three of them are like
Yeah, if I'm
around the
being
same
honest,
for
three
me.
kind of gets better
And
as I the more I think about it. So I might even like raise my rating later, depending on how much I think about it. So
Good.
yeah,
Well, oh, I see how it is. It's better than Amphibia season 3, Anthony.
you
Dang,
know, yeah, yeah, it
jerk.
is. You know, Anyways,
Mhm,
all right. You have anything else to
sure.
say, or should we get to our ratings about the third film?
Um, I have a brief note, but it's not about the movie, more just about the trilogy itself.
Sure.
I guess I'll just mention it now because we're like concluding. So, on these movies got re-released on DVD in the year 2015 because that's like 30-year anniversary. I have that DVD set actually, which is where I learned a lot of my trivia about these movies. But I don't know if you've have you seen there's just a little video on it where Doc Brown like for the 30th anniversary was like hi everybody, we're in the year 2015. It's supposed to like explain because the whole thing with Back to the Future 2, people were like, that's not the real 2015. But then Doc does this message where it's like, the future wasn't how we thought it would be. But that's how it always is. The future hasn't been written yet. It's still like I think it's a whole
And
it's
that's
supposed to
true.
tie into the movie's themes about the future's not always written. And I think it's kind of like, okay, you're really gonna put this retcon into your 30th anniversary DVD. But regardless, it's a cool looking thing. Doc Brown just talks to the audience. It's sweet. I like it. And yeah, I guess that's it for the trilogy.
Yeah, I don't think
Back
I've
to the
seen
Future
that
3
short.
is
One thing I want to mention
it's
before we
it
wrap
might be
it
on your
out.
blue if you want to look around. It's called like Doc Brown Saves the World or
Oh, I've
something.
heard. Yeah, I haven't
Something like
seen that. I think I missed that on the Blu-ray.
yeah,
I might have to check
it's
that out.
it's like a minute or two, I think. If you I think you should look it up if you can. It's
Yeah,
a
I'll
sweet
I'll
little
see if I
short.
can watch it.
But
Also, there's another scene I want to mention before we wrap up the third film. I really like the scene where Doc's at the bar and he just gets sad and just starts revealing
oh my
stuff
god, he
about the
comes. Yeah, I
future.
like how
It's like an interesting
yeah, his drunk
contrast.
nature is so
Yeah,
funny.
it's one of the yeah,
Yeah,
and also
because he's like giving
when
up
he
his like
blacks out
mindset.
from being drunk or something like that, even though having like one
Yeah,
scene
yeah.
just makes it that's funny.
Oh yeah, and then they have to fucking wake him up with like the peppers or whatever
Yeah, that's
after.
cool.
It's
I
fun.
forgot to mention that because that's like one of my
Yeah.
that's one of the I like both of those scenes. So yeah, they do work well for Doc's character. I think they one's a funny moment and one's a nice emotional moment for him. And yeah, anyways, I guess I'll get to the ratings now because that's pretty much the last thing I wanted
Uh,
to say.
9.
I'm gonna give it a high 7 or low 8, between that range for
So
me.
greedy.
Uh,
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. Anyways,
Uh,
thank you for tuning in for another episode of Campy Cast, our first of 2024. Um,
yeah. I
it
have been
might
looking forward to talking about these movies for a while, so it was
Sam.
fun to do so.
Yeah,
And hope you all have a great 2024
yeah,
because this is the new year and we did a lot new on this podcast. This is going to be a fresh year for Campycast. Don't
exactly.
you worry. A lot of fresh new ideas, a lot of
Fresh
great
new
stuff we got
ideas,
lined
and
up.
also it
Exactly.
might be a bit probably till we upload an episode again, but
Wait till February. That's all I'll say.
yeah,
Because January, if you don't know, it's like our busy. We both have very busy Januaries for school, but
yeah,
afterwards is usually when we're able to get uploads more consistently again. And Anthony, our boy over here, is going to be a little less busy next semester. So hopefully we can get a
yeah.
consistent lineup of episodes going. Maybe.
Yeah, hopefully we'll start
That's all.
uploading more this
Um.
year. But yeah. Anyways, thanks for tuning
Yeah.
in and bye-bye.